to you on LBC. Now, we're going to spend the next 55 minutes getting your reaction to that interview with Andy Burnham. He has been relatively quiet since his election victory. I mean, he made the big speech on Monday, but that's the first time that he's really been interviewed on any aspect of his programme for government. So we really want to hear what you thought of what he told Andrew Marr there. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp us on the same number. You can text 84850. While you're putting your fingers to the buttons, let's talk to Bethany Dawson, our political correspondent, to get her reaction as to what Andy Burnham said there. Now, to my mind, Bethany, the headline from that, which, I mean, we know the rest of the media were all listening to that. If I was writing that up in a newspaper for tomorrow morning, the headline would actually be, he didn't know about the £15 billion black hole in the defence investment plan. I think that is astonishing that the current Prime Minister didn't brief the future Prime Minister on that.
And this is something that journalists have been really trying to get to the bottom of over the last few days. At different briefings, we have consistently asked if Andy Burnham's team, if Andy Burnham himself was made aware of this black hole, and we were just told that private conversations would not be commented on. Now, frankly, that's desperately unhelpful, and now we understand the full picture. And as you say, it paints this image, doesn't it, of just quite a broken system. And Andy Burnham then sitting in with Andrew Marr saying that he wants to bring a new way of politics, reform the system, create something new. I mean, frankly, it doesn't look like Keir Starmer's side of the equation is sunny. Now, the thing that's, of course, important to say on that is that Andy Burnham has been busy. He has been in many meetings whilst, it seems as though the government of right now has been really focusing on the defence investment plan. There is, of course, the argument that maybe there just was not the time. However, this just doesn't look good for Keir Starmer. It does make this look like kind of the politics of old that actually, as Andy Burnham said, so many people are tired of.
I think another aspect of this, and he says he wants to do things differently, do Westminster politics differently. Now, his team have not briefed that he didn't know about this. That's the first time him saying directly to Andrew, no, I didn't know. No, nobody's known about that before. I mean, we've all speculated. But if he's got a grip on his advisors where they're not going to brief in the same way that Number 10 over the years, not just under Starmer, but under Boris Johnson, under Theresa May, under David Cameron, Blair Brown, if they are genuinely going to approach politics in a different way, I mean, it may be frustrating for the likes of you and me, but it'll actually be quite refreshing for the general public, I think.
I mean, the point I'll make on that is that his comms team and his team generally are going to grow exponentially when he does become Prime Minister. We can say if we're trying to be polite. But when he becomes Prime Minister, there are going to be so many more people around Andy Burnham than there currently are. So that threat of briefings, of slipped messages, is going to grow. But you're right now it does seem, frankly, very controlled. The leaks actually that are coming from Andy Burnham, and from sort of suggestions around what his government are going to look like, actually are coming from people within the current government or current backbench MPs. You're right, it's not coming from Andy Burnham's team. You can absolutely speak to some of them and they will give you guides. But when it comes to things that might be seen as negative briefings, like that Andy Burnham wasn't aware of that black hole, well, that's just not coming from anyone other than Burnham speaking directly to Mr. Marr himself.
Because it's very easy, isn't it, to think, oh, well, we've heard all of this before. David Cameron was going to do things differently. Tony Blair was going to do things differently. They're going to approach Prime Minister's questions differently and all the rest of it. And then when they get into office, it all goes out the window and you've got the same Yahoo politics. Now, maybe I'm being naive. I always get quite excited at the prospect of a new Prime Minister because there is always the prospect of something new happening. He talks a good game here, but do you think he can deliver on that?
You're right. We've never heard a Prime Minister or a to-be Prime Minister essentially say, do you know what, everything's great and I'm going to keep it business as usual, because that's what everyone wants. Every future leader says they're going to change things. Keir Starmer said he was going to change things. I won't get into a list, but every single one of them said they'll do it differently. There is an element of the Manchester twang, the northern twang does make it sound different. And he does speak, essentially like normal people. And he's incredibly good at speaking to the normal, quote unquote, public. Does that mean that we should trust that, yes, he is absolutely going to do things differently? No, not necessarily. But we can see that nothing about Andy Burnham up till now has actually been the sort of act of a normal politician. Some would say it's almost been worse because he is essentially getting coronated. He isn't even having a full leadership election. He wasn't involved in the last general election. Maybe that's the worst side of quote-unquote normal politics.
I think you invented a new word there. Coronated. Isn't it crowned?
You and my mother are both going to pull me up on that. I apologise profusely to everybody. However, I'll finish my rant of there are some that are going to say he has been the worst. He's done the worst things that you can do within normal politics. He's taken all the he's cut all the corners. He's gone around, the back doors and all that. But some would say, and we can not to give any spoilers. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but we can see from texts that people are thrilled to hear what he's saying, that he is sounding like a normal person. And maybe, yes, he is going to do something differently. I mean,
I would say, I haven't read every single one so far, but I would say it's 90% of the texts and messages that I'm seeing on my screen or that I've seen over the last 15 minutes have all been quite positive. And should we say that doesn't always happen?
Oh, it doesn't always happen, Ian. We get a beautiful tapestry of the emotions of the public. And no, I'd say
beautiful stretching it, but
I'm feeling. We've had a lovely day, Ian. I'm feeling quite flowery about everything. But no, no, we don't often see an overwhelmingly positive review of politicians. I think that's more than fair.
I mean, Andrew Marr deliberately didn't ask him who he was going to have as Chancellor. He sort of quite cleverly, I think, got round that by saying, well, have you made a decision? Flirted with it. And Andy Burnham was never going to tell him anyway. But, I mean, he did give an indication that he is going to follow a very different economic policy in terms of the regulation of public utilities, for example, in terms of taxation. He talked quite a lot about business taxation and business rates. Again, it's going to be very interesting to see how quickly that can be delivered, because the general public in 2026 is much more impatient than the general public would have been in 1926. They want success, and they want it now. They want to see change within a few months. Now, that's a tall order, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, interestingly, the former Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer did an interview with the BBC today, and he said that this is
Morgan McSweeney.
Yes, Morgan McSweeney, and he said that the public want change, but actually one of the problems that this Labour government ran into was that they didn't grapple with how quickly they want change. They want change yesterday. Andy Burnham is promising massive things. We should note that he did also say he would be sticking to Labour's manifesto. So he is sort of confined to within what was promised and within the sort of fiscal rules there.
Well, up to a point, he did say he would abide by the manifesto, and then said, yeah, but it would be sort of manifesto plus. We can do other things too. And I think that's entirely reasonable.
Yeah, he will be finding the wiggle room in there for absolute certainty. But I think, things like nationalising utilities, we should say that, some of the rail is being renationalised. These are things he's somewhat, in some areas, sort of picking up where Keir Starmer and his team have left off. But these are things that traditionally within the British state essentially take a very, very, very long time. And it's not just that Andy Burnham has a limited amount of time due to the public's impatience. It's because there's only 3 years until the next general election. So doing those big economic reforms and also setting up a number 10 in the north and also following through with Keir Starmer's policies, he's got a lot to do.
He has got a lot to do. And let's see how he sticks to what he said before, because over the last few years, he has said quite often that he thinks the borrowing rules need to be changed. He wants more public expenditure on all sorts of different things. But he said there in the interview with Andrew, business confidence comes from rock-solid public finances. Now, that was a clear signal to the city and a clear signal to whoever he chooses as his Chancellor that he's not going to be profligate with public money. He's not going to be reckless in terms of extra borrowing.
I thought it was really interesting, actually, how much time he spent saying that, essentially telling people to go away, who were saying that he might be sort of flimsy with the finances, he might be a bit trigger happy when it comes to spending. He seemed quite genuinely offended by that and really wanted to hammer that message home that he will be rock solid, as he said. He also very interestingly said that there is some movement on tax, business rates specifically, said that he thinks there should be higher business rates on warehouses, but a cut then on pubs and some high street businesses. He wants to bring life back to the high street. That is some granular detail we didn't have before. And again, I think was not just a message to the city, but to the high street, to normal people who want to feel as though there isn't a risk that their business will shut down, or indeed that their local business that they enjoy as part of their community will shut down.
In answer to the question, where's the beef? We got a little bit of minced beef today, I think, from him, and I'm not sure we could have asked for much more. Bethany, thank you very much indeed. We'll come to your calls in a moment, and we'll have a word with Andrew Marr himself. I mean, what's it like interviewing someone? There's a lot of pressure on an interviewer in these kind of interviews because you always want to get a newsline. I think Andrew successfully did that. We'll see what he made of it in just a minute and take your calls. Your reaction to what Andy Burnham has said in the first broadcast interview he's given since the by-election. 0345 6060 973. 16 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
How much has been spent? My listeners want to know.
Straight to the point.
We have two different stories. Which is the truth?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
What the hell lesson does that send to our children?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
New at all. As it was going on, what were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking, of course, I've heard that from the speech, that bit's from the speech, that bit's from the speech. And I knew perfectly well he wasn't going to sit down and say, my Chancellor is going to be X and my Foreign Secretary is going to be Y. I knew that. If I'd had more time, I would have spent more time on some of those personnel questions, that's for sure. I thought he answered a few things honestly, and very importantly, I thought his answer on tax, because he's talked about the fiscal rules and borrowing before, but he hasn't said before, as I can remember, that he would stick by the Labour Party's promises on tax, income tax, VAT, national insurance, which, however foolish they were at the election, were the manifesto promises that every Labour MP has stood on. And I think had he said anything other than yes, which he did, then we would have had calls for an election. So I thought that was a very important thing. And also, it was perfectly clear he was completely blindsided on the defence, 15 billion. People talk about 4.7. If you look at the figures and the detail, or the lack of detail, really, it's more like 15 billion. So that was interesting.
I mean, the fact that the current Prime Minister didn't tell the future Prime Minister that is going to be down to him, what does that tell you about the current Prime Minister?
I think it tells you that, certainly on the surface, he's dealt with these very, very difficult 2 weeks with a certain amount of grace and dignity, but he is still absolutely furious about the way he's been treated. It's not Andy Burnham's fault. Andy Burnham has been saying what he's been saying in public. He's gone to the electorate. It's all been out in the open. But I think Keir Starmer still feels he's surrounded by rats and he wants his revenge. And this is a kind of revenge. Of course, there are lots of decisions taken to fund something, and then you have to go to the next spending review to work out exactly how. Nonetheless, this is an awful lot of money in a very difficult period.
But Andy Burnham was very categoric. The defence of the nation must come first. And I think a lot of people will be quite encouraged to hear those kind of definitive words.
He is going to fund the Defence Investment Plan fully, quite clearly. The chiefs of the defence staff and others have been urging and pleading with him to say that, and tonight he said it.
People have often said, well, where's the beef? I mean, you weren't expecting him to provide all of the beef in that interview, but he did. He provided a few morsels, didn't he?
He certainly did. I mean, I think when you come to big issues like how is he going to fund his big council housing programme, how would he actually pay for public control of the big water the utilities, water and the rest of it? Those are big questions for another day. I mean, you can't expect somebody to produce an entire programme for government on the back of an envelope in a fortnight in a small room in Westminster. At the same time, he has been absolutely besieged by people desperate for jobs. I asked him if he was a little bit dismayed by the desperation with which some of his colleagues were begging for jobs.
Who are you talking about? I'm not going to name some names.
I think you can take virtually the entire cabinet, virtually the entire government in that. Lots of people have been in and out of the office, and some of them in quite a high-handed way. I'm told quite relatively junior people have been insisting on big jobs and warning of kind of, massive mistake if you don't appoint me and the rest of it. The entitlement.
It's quite brazen, isn't it?
The brazen's a good word. The brazen entitlement of some of the Westminster class has been extraordinary and I think has upset him a bit.
It is difficult for a new Prime Minister to get that balanced cabinet, isn't it? And you talked to him about having people from all sides of the party. I'm not sure you were talking about the Richard Bergens of this world, but...
No, I was really wondering whether he was going to bring in people like Wes Streeting from the right of the party, as well as Shabana Mahmood, into big jobs in cabinet or not. That's the big question. Is this going to be a sort of soft left takeover of government or not? And my view from the interview we've just done is not. This is going to be a much more widespread kind of Labour cabinet. And that's going to be important.
And inevitably, there has to be some carryover from the current administration. It's not going to be everybody out, new batch in. It will be a mix. But do you think that the new cabinet... Because, look, Tony Benn was always wrong about this. I think he always said, well, it's all about policies, not personalities. Politics is about personalities, as Tony Benn would have said. It is. And sometimes you have to have a really strong personality to drive things through. And there are some ministers who understand how to pull the levers of government and some that don't. And I would suggest to you that Angela Rayner knew how to pull the levers of government. And I think she would be getting a big job.
Old trade union negotiator that she was, yes. I think that's absolutely true. I think that among the problems that he's got is, does he bring in experienced people from outside he might feel comfortable with? And I'm talking about David Miliband as Foreign Secretary. There's talk today about Ed Balls coming back as well. Is there? There is, through the House of Lords. Or is that too much, putting the boys' band back together from the 1990s? And does he need to look at some of the, particularly the female members of the Parliamentary Labour Party and give them a leg up? Those kind of balances will become curiously important. Someone wrote the other day, you can't have more Milibands in the top 3 jobs than women. We shall see. Andrew Marr, well done. Great interview. Thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking to us about it. We're going to come to your calls now, 0345 6060 973. Are you in any way excited about the prospect of an Andy Burnham premiership? Because he does talk a good game, doesn't he? But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Can he live up to all of the rhetoric, all of the promises that he's made? Let's go to Matt in Oxford. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for taking my call.
Hi.
I got quite excited about this because I thought to myself that maybe I've actually spotted something that was actually going to be useful and helpful or interesting. And I think the thing about Andy Burnham from his first speech in this conversation, that he's not a politician as we kind of understand it. I wouldn't even say that he sees himself as a Labour politician. I think he sees himself in the model of Plato's philosopher king.
Explain.
Well, in that model, the philosopher king is his kingship is granted to him by the public, not by a hierarchical line. And what drives him, or his philosophy, is the common good. Is that he doesn't have. It won't be true for Andy, obviously, because this is a notional model that Plato had, but his real family will be the realm, his kingdom. He will see it will be the common people that drive his desires and his decisions, and the philosophy that he'll expect the common people, the general people in the realm to embrace. Defence will be strong with a philosopher king because he loves his people and they will love him and trust him implicitly because they believe, and so on.
Isn't the flaw
in that model? It fits his behaviour and his what he says far better than Labour or Tory.
Yeah.
He talks about collaboration across the parties. That's very much a philosopher king thing. He would have regional champions like the mayors. That's very. The only power he has is the power we grant him, and he knows that. The true philosopher king. And when he came down to London and sat on the train, that was something a philosopher king would do, not a politician.
Well, how else was he going to get to London, be driven?
No, well, I mean, when he stayed on the train and let the other people off, I remember hearing being reported that he'd suggest, he said to everyone, because he knew that everyone was waiting for him there, but he held back to allow others to get off. And I think that's very much the thinking of a philosopher king. I'm not saying he is one, but it seems that, I kind of believe him when he campaigned in Makerfield. He did it basically on his connection with Makerfield. Even though the rest of us were going nuts about the coronation, he stuck to, and he brought Makerfield up today as well. And he said regarding his MPs that it would be inclusive and it would be up to them to see what they had to offer. And that, are you on board with my philosophy? And he spent time laying out this philosophy. It's very philosopher king. And it could be really cool as long as he is, who he seems to be.
But I think the flaw in your argument there, if I may say so, is it was right at the beginning when you said he is of the people. I can't remember the exact words you used, but sort of the people put him there. Well, of course, the people haven't put him there. The Labour Party will have put him there. He will have put himself there. There's been no election. And, of course, the same thing happened when there was Conservative Party leadership changes as well. But most of those, apart from the Rishi Sunak one, at least there were party members that voted. Here, the party members aren't even going to get a vote because there are no other candidates.
Absolutely, but I don't suppose a philosopher king who believed and knew that his only purpose was to serve everybody else would worry too much about whether or not that philosophy fitted in with the broken system. I mean, I don't suppose he's worrying too much what Westminster feels about this shift. He's much more worried about what everybody else feels about the people who's going to be serving. And you were saying there were 90% positive. People are responding because it feels real. And it feels as if he does have a philosophy and he's going to apply that and he's going to use reason. It feels like that. And this is how it feels. He sounds much more like that model.
All right, Matt, well, you started off with coining a phrase, the philosopher king. I'm not sure Andy Burnham would recognise that in himself, but it's an interesting theory. Manny is in Chorlton in Greater Manchester. Hello, Manny.
Hi, Matt. You okay?
I'm fine, thank you. What would you like to say?
So the biggest elephant in the room for Labour at this moment in time is their general voter base is fly-knotted Greens, and Labour, how badly they were damaged at the locals for the last 2 years, Gorton and Denton, and this mayoralty is a bit all over the place at the moment. I'm struggling to understand as to why the elephant in the room of what a lot of voter base are asking for, which is Gaza, is not being talked about by Burnham's team or Burnham. It's a lot of people are kind of waiting and hoping that a fresher breath air on the current Labour policy on where they are with Gaza and how they're dealing with Israel is hopefully going to be that breath of fresh air from Burnham's team. Now, it's worrying because it's Burnham experienced on foreign policy. It's not. I don't know if Burnham's got that. If Burnham's got that. If he's got the power to kind of make a change and be powerful and pull back the Labour base and say, do you know what's happening out there is absolutely terrible. It is a genocide, and a lot of people are calling it a genocide in Gaza.
Just because people call it one, that doesn't actually make it one. And I mean, he. The only thing I've heard him say with regard to Palestine was 10 years ago in the Labour leadership campaign in 2015. He said that if he won that leadership, which of course Jeremy Corbyn won, the first country he would visit would be Israel. That's the only comment I've been able to find that he's made on that. Now, that was 10 years ago. He's certainly not going to make that promise today. But you clearly want him to make a real change in direction for the Labour Party on this and be much clearer in articulating a pro-Palestine policy.
It's not a pro-Palestine policy. I think if you follow in terms of what scholars have said, leading scholars, I think the UN has just come out and said Israel is deliberately targeting children. Are we excusing that, Matt?
I'm not excusing anything, but I'm going to try and articulate what I think a lot of people listening to you are probably thinking. Is Gaza really the most important issue for Andy Burnham as a new Prime Minister to get to grips with? Most people will...
Policy, yes.
You think yes?
On foreign policy, yes.
Well, he hasn't been questioned on foreign policy at all because, the interview that Andrew just did was meant to be predominantly about the speech that he gave on Monday and economic policy. It's going to be very... look, I agree with you. I think it is going to be interesting how he changes Labour policy, if at all, on all different aspects of foreign policy, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Israel, whether it's Putin, whether it's Trump, whether it's the EU. There's going to be all sorts of things that he's going to be asked, and I don't know yet whether he's really formed views on that, because there's little evidence, as I say, over the last 20 years of him talking about foreign policy at all. Manny, thank you very much indeed. Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973. That's the number to call. It's 7:31. Let's get the news headlines from Amelia Cox.
Andy Burnham has exclusively told LBC he will stick to Labour's manifesto promises, but believes there is some headroom to change taxes. The man most likely to replace Sir Keir Starmer says he'd like to introduce cuts to business rates.
I believe there is a case for higher business rates on warehouses and the major developments we see on the outskirts of our cities, so that we can cut business rates for pubs, and I've proposed a 20% cut, and lift some high street businesses out of business rates altogether. I say some and not all, because I think it's important to, if you like, prioritise and reward the businesses that bring social benefit, the businesses that bring people together, the bars, the restaurants, the coffee shops, the hairdressers.
He also insists he hasn't chosen his cabinet, but wants to make it the most inclusive, so all parts of his party could see themselves in it. 2 boys who were spared jail for the rape of 2 young girls in separate attacks have now been detained for 4 years each. The Court of Appeal has ruled their sentences were unduly lenient following public outcry. And the Scottish and UK governments are facing calls to compensate the mothers who were forced to give up their children between the 1940s and 1970s. It follows a state apology made by Sir Keir Starmer, who described the practice as a stain on our history. LBC weather tonight, a stray shower in West Scotland, otherwise dry for most with clear spells developing, a low of 7 degrees.
LBC.
I don't know anything about really what he's going to do. There's been no contest. I think it's quite arrogant to just walk in and take over governing. Outside of Manchester, no one really knows anything about the guy, and he's just going to start dictating policies to the country. There's been no calls for a general election. There was widespread calls from all media outlets, questions from journalists saying, are you going to call a general election? You haven't got a mandate to govern. I've not seen that at all with this. For Andy Burnham. And I know he's only just done his first interview, but I really, really hope the media starts asking those questions, because from my point of view, 10 years ago we voted for Brexit, and now we've just had a very, very anti-Brexit Prime Minister shipped in out of Manchester with zero mandate, as far as I'm concerned. So...
Well, his mandate will come from Parliament, because that's the way a parliamentary democracy works. I completely agree with you that it is completely hypocritical for particularly those on the left and in many parts of the media not to be calling for a general election now. As you're right, they did after Boris Johnson left, they did after Liz Truss left, and when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. We can all draw our own conclusions as to why that is. People always talk about the right-wing media. I've never seen it that way. It's generally the media, I think, is in many cases slightly biased to the left. Now, I want to give Andy Burnham a fair crack. I'm not somebody who's going to criticise him right from the start. I think he needs to be given a bit of time to bed in. But in the end, it's the Labour Party that your eyes should be directed at, because they haven't been able, out of 400 MPs, to come up with a single one that would actually have a contest that would enable at least Labour Party members to vote for their party leader.
I completely agree. But even over the last 2 years, you think of everything that's gone on. From the way that Starmer responded to the Southport riots. A word that was used a lot throughout the last 5 years of the Tory government was chaos from the media. They constantly said, this is a government in chaos, chaos, chaos. I've not heard that word used once throughout Starmer's premiership. But to me, the last 2 years have been non-stop chaos.
Yeah.
Why aren't the media using those sort of words? It's been an absolute disaster. Constant U-turns, and it's destroyed businesses across the country, especially with the national insurance hike. That's caused untold harm to the economy. Why aren't the media using words like chaos? Because it's just, honestly, I feel like Starmer's had such a free ride, and it's his party that's forced him out at the end, just purely because of polling. But it's not the media that's forced him out, it's because of polling. The media needs to really
it's partly that.
do its job.
I mean, you can talk about the media as a sort of anonymous conglomerate. There's no such thing as the media. The media consists of individuals and individual broadcasters. And I think if you're a regular listener to my programme, you will know that I have criticised Keir Starmer regularly over the constant flip-flops. And then I keep being told, oh, yes, but the Tories did this as well. Even Margaret Thatcher did it, blah, blah, blah. I don't recall a government in my lifetime that has flip-flopped in its first 2 years as much as this one. Now, they will say, well, we got to the right place in the end. Well, no, you didn't, actually. Most of the time, you've made the wrong decisions, even with the flip-flops. But I mean, I hear what you say.
It's even on policy decisions though. So, they found 20 billion instantly for the NHS. God knows how much has gone to the NHS in the last 2 years, to be honest. But their priorities has just been. And has that really fixed the NHS? It seems to me as well. Also with the trade unions, they seem to only really want to go on strike when it's a Conservative government in power. When there's a Labour government in power, it seems like they can negotiate quite easily. I know the doctors have been a slight exception, but everyone else just seems to be satisfied that Labour's in power and is all of their job roles and the qualms they've had about their jobs, all those issues seem to have gone away all of a sudden. So, it's quite interesting. So, I mean, if we get a Reform government or a Conservative government after this, it'd be very interesting to see how the unions react to that, because all of a sudden I suspect a lot of those job issues they was complained about previously will come back. And we talk about vested interests. There's been a lot of scrutiny with Nigel Farage recently. But it'd be very interesting for the media to, hold the unions and Labour to account on exactly what Labour is agreeing with the unions with regards to promoting certain strikes when certain parties are in power.
Well, Mark, I'll do my best. Thank you very much. Andy says, finally, someone who says it as it is. I'm not a Labour supporter, but I would certainly get on board with Mr. Burnham. And I'm judging for a lot of the texts that I'm getting, that does seem to be quite prevalent in the text. People saying, well, I may not vote Labour generally, but I like the cut of his jib. I want to give him a chance. Here's another text from Marita. This reminds me of every single Labour MP spilling the same narrative during the election run-up. Look at how much he's just said already that he used in his speech. It's just more of the same. Well, all politicians repeat what they've said in speeches. The more they repeat it, the more they think the public will actually get it. Suzanne says, good evening. All you hear continuously from this guy is Greater Manchester, Greater Manchester. We don't all live in Greater Manchester, and I don't want to wait to change the education system before we improve the amount of kids on benefits. Then we have an awfully long road ahead that I don't think many of us have the time or patience. It's just a load of waffle. Do put some punctuation in your text, like a few full stops and commas here and there. It does help me when I read them out. Douglas is in Dunfermline. Hello, Douglas.
Good evening to you, Ian. I enjoyed Andrew's interview with Andy, but I was disappointed that Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland weren't mentioned at all. You look at what happened to the Labour Party in Scotland at the May elections, you look at what happened in Wales at the May elections, and he needs to take the whole country with him. He's not going to be be Prime Minister of England, he's going to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Well, with respect, Douglas, England wasn't mentioned either. I mean, he was talking as the future Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and I think it's a bit carping in a sort of 15, 20-minute interview to say, oh, well, Scotland and Wales weren't mentioned. I mean, it was about more or less about UK economic policy.
Well, I would say how does he interact with the Scottish Parliament? How does he interact with the Welsh Parliament?
Fine, and that's a question that the Scottish and Welsh media can ask him.
Yeah, well, I hope he does, because there are opportunities there. I mean, I remember when the Scottish Government first came into post, where we had a Labour and Lib Dem coalition, and it worked really, really well. He needs to work out a way of Westminster working with the Scottish Parliament, Westminster working with the Welsh Parliament, and the devolved administration in Northern Ireland.
Well, he does seem to be, at least initially, a lot more consensual than some of his predecessors. I think that John Swinney has complained that he doesn't feel that he's being consulted enough or had enough to do with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. I think Rishi Sunak did more of that than certainly Boris Johnson did. Boris Johnson almost seemed to treat Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford with a certain degree of contempt. I think it was probably mutual as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason the Labour Party didn't do so well in the May elections up here in Scotland, because they just didn't see the governments working together. And they should be able to. And what I got from Andy's speech tonight was basically saying, I want to work with other parties, but he's got to make sure he works with other parties across the UK, not just in Westminster.
No, very fair point. Thank you very much. A couple more texts here. Ollie says, Burnham, yes, yes, yes. Ollie's gone all Meg Ryan on us all of a sudden. Older listeners will understand what I mean by that. Carl says, Andy, and then puts a heart. Jan says, Burnham, our saviour, I hear nothing original. And this is from, let's click on that. Why isn't it coming up? Here we go. Ryan says, great show, probably the best ever. Just want to say, and this is to Andy, not me, you've become a big inspiration to me this last week, Andy. Oh, get lost. Hang on a second. This is taking a turn. Oh, get lost, you disingenuous fool, probably not even listening. And by the way, our colleagues are not going to help you. No, I think we'll leave that one there. It's taken a very, very dark turn. Right, on cross question at 8, we have the Labour MP for Loughborough, Dr. Jeevan Sander, Ollie Glover, Liberal Democrat Transport spokesperson and MP for Didcot and Wantage, Lucy Harris, former Brexit Party and Conservative MEP, and Caroline Slowcock, Director of the Civil Exchange think tank and former private secretary to Margaret Thatcher and John Major. She's got a new book out called Bad Government, so they'll be here from 8 to answer your questions. 0345 6060973 if you'd like to ask a question in cross question. But in the meantime, we'll take more of your calls on your reaction to Andrew Marr's interview with Andy Burnham. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 7:45.
This is LBC.
Tony, what do you want to tell me? Good morning.
Scott has called from Glasgow. Hi, Scott.
Jane's in Camden first. Hi, Jane.
Westminster hasn't been working for people. And as a result, the country isn't where it should be. We need to change politics, and we need to do it now.
Hear every side of the story.
We need somebody who's a commander. We need somebody in this country who's going to be on a war footing.
An actual working class Prime Minister who's going to instill some old style English values.
People worry about Andy Burnham because he's making a political statement.
So I feel massive relief, to be honest, that this has happened.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. LBC, leading Britain's conversation.
going to prison despite raping two girls aged 14 and 15 have now been detained for 4 years after the Court of Appeal ruled that their sentences were too lenient. Well, I think anybody that's followed this case, I think we were all horrified by the fact that they weren't sent to jail at the time. Well, Benji Hire, our reporter, he was at the Court of Appeal for today's hearing. And Benji, you've also been speaking to the parents of one of the victims.
I have, in the past few moments. And they shared, of course, they led the outrage following the initial sentence where the boys were spared jail, and the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, even intervened to say he questioned the sentencing. They told me that when that sentence landed, that they were in a state of disbelief, that they were heartbroken and sick and disheartened in the justice system. They felt it had let them down, and that the judge, in handing down those sentences, had actually more protected the boys, the offenders, than he had done the two female victims. They also said that, the process has moved, and now the Court of Appeal has decided that these boys should now be detained instead of being allowed to serve a youth rehabilitation order, and that the original judge erred in his assessment. These fresh sentences will be for 4 years, but once you take away the time served, once you consider the fact that if they behave, they'll be out after about half of that time. The parents of one of the victims said that 4 years, or however many years, is simply not enough. And in fact, whatever number that the Court of Appeal came up with will never be enough to replace the lifetime sentence that their daughter now has to live with, following the trauma that she experienced during that assault, but also in the months afterwards, the trial, the sentencing, which has now been, of course, revised. I should also mention that they bumped into Andy Burnham on his way out, because, of course, he was speaking earlier to Andrew Marr, and they said that they had quite a friendly conversation with him and were looking forward to maybe even meeting or talking with him about a change to the justice system, a change to the sentencing guidelines to, in effect, make sure that the justice system isn't failing women and girls who have experienced the sort of violence they have.
I don't want to bounce you on this, but I don't know the answer to this question, but you might. I mean, this 4 years that they've been given now, what's the maximum that they could have been given? Do you know that?
It depends, Ian, on whether they would have been tried as an adult. And again, I think that that's one of the things the parents want to consider. They said to me, it shouldn't matter the age, it should matter what the crime is. Now, of course, many people listening will have differing opinions about that, but they feel that if you've done a very serious crime, you should be tried, in effect, as an adult. These children weren't. So if they were an adult, they would have faced, say, 20 or so years, but this would be more fitting, the Court of Appeal says, given their age. They were 14 at the time of the crime. They are now 15. The girls that were raped were a similar sort of age. I should just mention there was a third younger boy. His sentence wasn't changed because of his age, but also because he played a lesser role in the offences. But there were multiple offences on 2 different women on 2 different occasions.
It's appalling to, I mean, any parent listening at the moment will think, well, oh my God, how would my children, how would my girls cope? How would we as a family cope if this sort of thing happened to us, where we've gone through the initial crime was bad enough, but as you say, going through this over the last year, 18 months, I mean, it puts terrible strain on families. And if you are a girl who's 14, 15 years old, I mean, every individual is different, but this is not something that you can get over very, very quickly. I mean, I don't know if they talked to you about how their daughter was coping in the aftermath of all of this.
I did ask. I'm going to be really candid, and the answer is that she has very much struggled to cope, as you can imagine. She has stated, their daughter, that at times she felt she wanted to die because she was unable to reckon with what had happened. And obviously it's a very difficult thing that she's experienced. And they were very candid in how she has been in and out of hospital, for example, and not been able to fully live her life. not least because she's been in fear of bumping into those offenders again because they weren't behind bars. They now have a restraining order in place for life. So there's an element of safety there. But she clearly is finding it very difficult to recover from the trauma. And the parents made that clear. But they also made clear, Iain, their desire to work collaboratively with other parents of other victims to try to improve the situation such that other people wouldn't have to go through the same. And they do hold hope that their daughter will be able to still live a life that's full of joy and of happiness. They have showed incredible courage and incredible resilience in the face of incredible, difficult circumstances.
Well, I think that's very important, and I think it's important for them to know, and I hope if you speak to them again, you will tell them this, that I think our entire audience will have so much sympathy and empathy with what they've gone through and their courage in speaking out now.
Yes, and indeed the other family as well, I should mention, who I haven't spoken to, but of course will be going through very much the same thing in this moment.
Benji, thank you very much indeed. That's Benji Hire, the LBC South of England reporter. Right, let's go back to your calls on the interview between Andrew Marr and Andy Burnham. Let's go to Ash, who's in Brecon. Hello, Ash.
Hi there. Hi, Iain. I'm a little bit nervous.
Don't be nervous of me.
What I want to say is that a lot of people do not know, or I think they do not know, Andy Burnham gives 15% of his pay to homeless people. All these people that have been on the phone today asking for a general election here and doing this there and doing that there, he's not elected, there's no mandate and all that. How many MPs actually give 15% of their pay to homeless people?
I don't know the answer to that question. Probably very few.
Exactly. And he is one of them. And honestly, it amazes me how people in this country can't just generally grab something like what Andy Burnham is, giving 15% of his pay and has done for, I don't know how many years he's done it for. But, if I was the Prime Minister and he's going to be one, I would make sure my cabinet gives at least 10% of my pay to the homeless people.
I think that is a laudable thing to do, and you're right, he has done that, and I think he said he's going to continue doing it. I would, however, point out that the number of homeless people in Manchester has mushroomed over the years.
Well, how much do you want him to give? Do you want him to give 50%?
No. I'm not saying he should give more. All I'm saying is that if solving the homeless problem in Manchester as mayor of Greater Manchester was a top priority, you would imagine that the numbers of homeless people would have come down. But the last time I read about this, they'd actually gone up quite substantially. Now you can say, well, that's.
Last time you read about this?
Pardon?
When did you last time read about this?
A couple of weeks ago.
Couple of weeks ago. Okay, I'll take your point. I don't have a problem with that issue at all. All I wanted to say is there was another guy that came on that said when he got off the train, he let a lot of other people out first before he got out. So that's the kind of person he is. And I think we should just give him some time instead of asking him who his chancellor is going to be, who his foreign secretary is going to be.
And Andrew Marr didn't do that.
I know, I understand that. The media is crying out for that kind of thing, aren't they? No?
Well, yes. You can't blame political journalists for wanting to know who he's going to appoint to different jobs. That's kind of what they do. But I take the point that you're making, Ash. I think that we, in the political media, have got to actually look ourselves in the mirror and think, well, maybe we should be doing things a little bit differently now, not just relying on the Westminster gossip. But, of course, the problem is that it's people within government who feed that gossip. Now, if he runs a government that doesn't leak, that doesn't brief against people within the government, and doesn't give the journalists the opportunity to report on that sort of thing, well, we will have to change the way we do things.
I hope so, Iain. I just think that this guy is a breath of fresh air, and a lot of people that are listening to this conversation need to realise what kind of a man he is. And there's not many people like him in this country. I wish you would give at least 5% of your pay to the homeless people. That would be fantastic. I'm sure you do lots of other charitable things, which we all do in this country. And everybody a lot of people, there's so many good people in this country. It's unbelievable the amount of
voluntary work that people do.
And I mean, if you're listening at 9:30 tonight, you will hear me interviewing someone from the Disasters Emergency Committee who will be telling us what the British people have done for the people of Venezuela after that terrible earthquake. We have in this country a really proud record of giving to charities, to emergency disaster appeals, and long may it continue to be so. Ash, thank you very much indeed for your call. It's time for Thursday's Cross Question. I'll be joined in the studio by Labour MP for Loughborough, Dr. Jeevan Sander. Ollie Glover is Liberal Democrat Transport spokesman and MP for Didcot and Wantage. Lucy Harris, former Brexit Party and Conservative MEP and also a former Conservative advisor. And Caroline Slowcock, Director of the Civil Exchange think tank and former Private Secretary to Margaret Thatcher and John Major. She's also got a new book out, published this week, called Bad Government and What to Do About It. So it'll be interesting to hear what she has to say about the changes possibly in the way that government is done over the next few years. The number to call 0345 6060 973, and don't forget to watch us on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock. In his first broadcast interview since he won the Makerfield by-election, Andy Burnham has told LBC there is some room in the Labour manifesto for movement on tax. But he says he'll stick by Labour's 2024 general election manifesto.
So if you take business rates, for instance, I believe there is a case for higher business rates on warehouses and the major developments we see on the outskirts of our cities, so that we can cut business rates for pubs and lift some high street businesses out of business rates altogether. I say some because I think it's important to prioritise and reward the businesses that bring social benefit, the businesses that bring people together, the bars, the restaurants, the coffee shops, the hairdressers.
He's also admitted that the cost of living is too high for everyday goods.
What I would do, if successful, is lay out a plan for more public control over water, energy, transport, so that over the period we can get those bills down, fares down, and give businesses breathing space.
The MP for Makerfield also revealed to LBC that he was not included in the recent discussions about the government's defence investment plan. In other news, the parents of one of two girls raped by two teenage boys in Hampshire say their daughter's life will forever be tainted by what happened. The 15-year-olds avoided a custodial sentence in May, but the Court of Appeal has now sentenced them both to 4 years detention. The mother of one victim says her daughter's not doing well right now, but after today, she will. We've revoiced her words.
She can now finally understand that standing up and saying something has got her somewhere, because when the trial ended and she heard what the sentences were, she thought, well, what was the point? Why did I even bother going through 18 months of pain, going through everything if there was going to be no punishment, essentially?
The Prime Minister's asked the Home Secretary to review the case of the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang. British Pakistani Shabir Ahmed has been released from prison amid growing calls for him to be deported, but laws passed in the 1970s make that difficult. And pubs will be able to stay open until 5 a.m. on Monday morning, so fans can watch England's next World Cup match. Their last 16 tie with Mexico kicks off at 1 a.m. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 174 points at 10,652. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.16. LBC weather tonight, a stray shower in the west of Scotland. Otherwise dry for most with clear spells developing, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Thursday's Cross Question. On the panel with me, to my left, Caroline Slowcock, Director of the Civil Exchange think tank, former Private Secretary to Margaret Thatcher and John Major. She has a new book out and she's brought it with her so I can brandish it in front of the camera. It's called Bad Government, Brackets and How to Make It Better. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. Next to her is Dr. Jeevan Sander, Labour MP for Loughborough. He's a PPS at the Department Department for Business and what's the official title now?
Department for Business and Trade.
Right, because it keeps changing, doesn't it? To my right, Lucy Harris, former Brexit Party and Conservative MEP and a former Conservative advisor. And next to her, making his debut on the show, Ollie Glover, Liberal Democrat transport spokesman and MP for Didcot and Wantage. As you know, they are here to answer your questions. The number to call 0345 6060 973. You can text us on 84850, and of course you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go to our first caller. It's Scott in Ramsgate. Hello, Scott.
Hi, and my question to the panel is there anything wrong with, restarting an old band? And I mean that by, for example, Andy Burnham potentially bringing back in Ed Balls, David Miliband into the party.
I would say I didn't know that there were rumours about Ed Balls. I'd heard the rumours about David Miliband. I mean, it would really be getting the band back together, wouldn't it? But I mean, there's a downside to this as well, isn't there, Jeevan? Because if you just get the old band back together, you're basically telling all the new MPs who were elected in 2024 that they're not good enough, i.e. you.
Well, I hope that's not going to be the message. I think, look, Andy will, of course, choose his team. We'll set it out in the next few weeks. But from my personal perspective, the way I feel about this, we want our best players on the pitch, wherever they can come from. Both David Miliband, Ed Balls, Ed Miliband contributed a huge amount in that last New Labour government. Possibly one of our most successful periods in government we've ever had.
16 years ago.
It was, but they all look pretty much the same age, so happy days for us. They've got fewer greys than I do, and I'm relatively young.
Relatively. I mean, do you feel a sense of excitement at the moment, or do you think, let's just get through this and get through it and just carry on? Because I think there are so many things that, there was so much chaos with all the different Conservative changes, and you can say that, well, this is going to be smooth because there isn't going to be a proper election, but there is part of the voting public feel that they're being slightly shortchanged by this.
I feel hopeful and determined is where I'm at. Like, on the one hand, Andy had a brilliant victory in Makefield and set out like a political vision for this country, which I think accords with mine, which is that we are stronger when we stand together, not when we stand apart. On the other side of politics, it's let's pick someone, let's point at them and blame them, especially if they look different. They're the reason for all of our problems. At a time when we're facing the most important parliament for a century, an affordability crisis, you're seeing that lead to frustration and fury, expanded, fueled by tech-filled rage, funded by crypto billionaires. We have war in Europe and a burning planet. Like, this is a time of monsters, the most important parliament for a century. So I am determined we get that right, and I'm hopeful that going forward with Andy, with the best Labour politicians, wherever they may be, inside or outside of Parliament, will address this moment and meet it and have the courage to do so, because that's exactly why I came into politics and why we're all here.
Caroline, you saw a transition of power from Margaret Thatcher to John Major from the inside. You were Margaret Thatcher's private secretary and then John Major's. What lessons can the current Labour government learn from that transition of power?
Well, John Major managed to win the next election. And at the point when he came in, things looked really bad for the Tories. So the change actually worked in that case. But what he did was he swiftly, immediately actually, just changed the poll tax, which was the policy which was causing Margaret Thatcher to be so unpopular in the country. And he also created a much more collegiate form of government. You could see it immediately in the way that they were a team, in the way that the cabinet weren't before. So I think he started to govern differently as well. So,
which Andy Burnham has given a real indication that that's his plan as well.
And I think it's important. If you can't even keep your own team together, then how can you do what he's promising to do, which is to bring the whole country together?
So what could Andy Burnham do that would be the equivalent of change the poll tax? Because he said he will stick by Labour's manifesto. But is there something that you can point to where he could give a real signal that, well, this is going to be a different government?
Well, I think his pitch, and it's quite a good one, is that he's going to govern differently. And in 2024, a survey showed that 80% of the country were felt that Britain needed to change how it was governed. They weren't happy with it. So I think it's not just so much about that kind of magic policy. I think it's also about a really different style. But the problem is, as I say in my book, Bad Government, it starts with a speech with Starmer, outside Number 10, promising to put country first and party second, promising to bring people together and restore trust, is that prime ministers tend to say these things, yes. But then they tend to revert, back to the standard pattern once they get, into government, and then, the status quo starts to overwhelm them, and it's so hard to make change happen. But I think his pitch has to be that he's really going to do things differently. And I hope that he will. And I think devolving more, decentralising government more is part of that. But as well, he needs to sort out the centre of government. He needs to make that work much better. And one of the dysfunctionalities of governments over many years is Number 10's just got bigger and bigger. It was 3 times the size it was under Margaret Thatcher. And of course, since then, we've had masses of devolution in Scotland, Wales, and to devolved administrations. But, what tends to happen is they talk the talk of devolution, but then they suck in ever more power into Number 10, maybe Number 10 North as well in this case. And then things start to slow down.
Let me counter that, because I think it's your old profession that is the problem here. I think it's the civil service that stops meaningful reform, and that you have to have a really strong cabinet minister to stand up to civil servants who do not want to relinquish power to devolved governments or assemblies or councils, because it means that they don't control them anymore. You've got to have strong ministers who will actually force this through.
And you do have to have strong ministers. Margaret Thatcher was such a minister. She got on very well with the civil service once she'd established that she was the master, and she really did get things done.
Apart from the Foreign Office, obviously.
Well, apart from the Foreign Office, but Charles Pole, from the Foreign Office, was the man who, read to her the night before she died the brief lives of prime ministers and kissed her goodbye. So she.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is right. Yes. So she actually, became close to the civil service because she knew that's how you deliver things. I mean, it's my experience actually that if you have a minister who's clear about what they want to do and determined to get on with it, then the civil service wants to follow. That's they're servants. But if you present them with a fudge and you're not clear what you want to do and you change your mind all the time, then the institutional inertia takes on. And, so I think it comes down ultimately to the strength of the ministers. Obviously, there's a danger with the civil service that it's not going to do what you want to say. But I think there's been far too much finger pointing, to coin a phrase from Andy Burnham, at the last government called the blob. Far too much, using them as the...
See, Liz Truss is going around saying she's been proved right, and what Andy Burnham is saying is exactly what she was saying.
Well, no, I mean, she was saying that the civil service had an agenda to slow her down, and I think, actually... if you point fingers, at other people in the country, at other parties, and at the civil service, you actually become dysfunctional because the trust breaks down with the civil servants. They start putting more and more decisions to you because they know that they don't trust you. The whole machine starts to grind slowly to a halt.
Well, you and I are going to talk about these issues in much greater length on my All Talk podcast in the next couple of weeks, so watch out for that. Ollie, let's come to you. Ollie Glover from the Liberal Democrats. Going back to Scott's original question, does getting the old Brownite band back together excite you?
I would say not, because I think there's a lot of nostalgia for the Blair and Brown era, but I think people forget how the last 2 or 3 years were of that government, and that Labour did lose 100 seats in one go in the 2010 election. So I think perhaps some of that nostalgia isn't justified. I suppose it's a positive sign of Andy Burnham's commitment to recycling and sustainability at this time. But I think what I would say what's really needed in any sort of leadership or management team is a good mix of people. You do want some people who have experience from before, and so I think a bit of that is welcome, but you also need new ideas and fresh thinking. And I think a really important thing I hope Andy Burnham is thinking about is, and I say this with the greatest respect to Dr. Sander, it does seem that the primary factor for Keir Starmer in choosing his team was loyalty to Starmer Labour. And I think what the country really needs is a Labour Party that is not going to be former Starmerites and Burnhamites, etc. So I hope he will get a good blend of people he knew from before when he was in cabinet and some of the new talent that is in the current Labour government.
Somebody wrote last week that it would be quite odd to have more Miliband's in the top 4 positions in government than women. I mean, that's the main thing where I can't see David Miliband coming back, Jeevan.
Well, look, we're going to have to see what Andy does, right, at the end of the day. I mean, I'm not going to be calling his shots for him, but David, I was once at an event with David not too long ago, and the depth of thinking there is incredibly impressive. Ed Balls is incredibly impressive. I read his regional inequality paper about 5 or 6 times at least.
He's getting rich from a podcast. He's got a brilliant job on Good Morning Britain. Why would he give that up to go into the House of Lords?
Well, he might not, right? Who knows what's going to happen? But I am saying these are brilliant thinkers and brilliant talents of our party who contributed a huge amount. And if Andy wants to bring them back in, absolutely yes.
Lucy, how do you see it?
I find it really interesting because having a look at all the different parties, you look at Reform, you look at Labour, you look at the Conservatives, they've all identified... they've all identified that there is a systematic problem, but they're all pointing at different systems. You have Reform pointing at judiciary, civil service, quangos, and then you have Andy Burnham, who seems to be pointing at how we could resolve this through his concept of hyperlocalism. And this isn't an idea that has been newly coined by Andy. This, in fact, is something that's been kicking around for a while in the sort of shape of Blue Labour. And you can definitely see a trace of Blue Labour also in Reform's original policies before Robert Jenrick came in, which was that hyperlocalisation of investment. I'm slightly sceptical whether the economic plans that Andy Burnham has put forward would work. There's no actual evidence that economically it would create growth, but there is some evidence that it would help better investment. It would actually make more of investment. So credit where credit's due in terms of where there is some evidence.
There was one thing he said to Andrew Marr, I really pricked up my ears when I can't remember the exact words he used, but he railed against what I call the agentsification of government, where, and I think for actually good reasons. I think the major government really started down this road where they created all of these arm's length agencies, but politicians then didn't have any control over them. So the Highways Agency ostensibly was running the road system, but if an MP wrote to a transport minister and say, "Oh no, it's nothing to do with us. That's for the Highways Agency," and that does not lead to public confidence in government, does it?
It's fascinating to see where politicians now want power to lie. Do they want it in the hands of your local council and mayoralties, or would they like it more centralised in the hands of politicians centrally? And so that's kind of the battle that's being played out right now. And that's the recalibration of politics that I think was instigated by Brexit. And you can certainly see, looking at how Andy is selling himself, he is a Labour populist. There's a lot of chat, not a lot of numbers. And in this day and age, it's not words and deeds, it's words and numbers. And I'm yet to see any numbers. And that will be the interesting point. I think everybody's looking forward to the budget, which will really be the case in point, whether he flails or flies. And we'll see what happens there.
Well, we are going to see in 3 weeks' time. We should also talk about Andy Burnham's record in Manchester. It was the fastest growing region of the country. We talk about the deprivation falling at that time. Why do I and my colleagues have faith? Why do my colleagues have faith in Andy Burnham?
No, sorry. The homeless numbers have gone up in Manchester. The bus travel, which he says is one of his greatest achievements, bringing it back into public ownership, bus travel has gone down by 12%.
So I said deprivation had fallen in Manchester, and I think he did do a good job of homelessness, and I think the bus travel has been incredibly popular during that period. But more than that, we did see Manchester grow. So to your point, I think it's fair to say, what does it mean, this model of governance? You did see a devolved model of governance work well in Manchester. It's one reason why my colleagues do have faith, and indeed I have faith in Andy Burnham now to take us forward at this moment. The other thing about the UK is that we have the most centralised governance system inside the OECD, and that's one of the reasons we are the most geographically, economically unequal.
Really?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Much more. We have an insane amount of power centralised in Whitehall. And look, I worked in the Treasury before. It was great as a 20-something-year-old doing it, but it was objectively mad that there was like 400 civil servants allocating £600 billion of expenditure. And so what do you see in this country? You see really good transport links getting from London to MPs' constituencies. What you don't see is good transport links between those constituencies. And that's one reason why our second cities haven't grown. I'm in the East Midlands. We have the lowest transport spending in the country. London gets 3 times more per person.
I've just thought of an equivalent of the poll tax. Reinstate the Birmingham to Manchester leg of HS2. I'm not sure it's even possible, though, because I think they've sold off a lot of the land already. But that would certainly be a very bold thing to do, wouldn't it? Right, we'll move on to some more questions in a moment. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 90 minutes past 8.
LBC.
Author of this book, Bad Government and How to Make It Better. Well, if you can make it better, we'd all benefit from that, wouldn't we? Right, let's take a text question from David. If Andy Burnham didn't know about how short of cash for defence Keir Starmer's big plan is, does that confirm that he's the worst PM this country has ever had? Now, earlier this evening, the Prime Minister in waiting, so it seems, told LBC's Andrew Marr that he didn't have all of the details about the government's defence investment plan, but added that he will take his responsibilities fully to fund the defence investment plan, adding that he would make no compromise on the security of the nation. So, I mean, effectively, this £15 billion black hole, he wasn't told about it, and he said that in no uncertain terms. Ollie Glover, I mean, what do you make of that?
I mean, it's not great, but I have a bit of sympathy for him in that the outgoing Prime Minister has created this fudge of unveiling this defence investment plan, which is really important, but without a clear way of how it's going to be funded. And I think that's something that critically needs to be addressed, not just for our country and for our armed forces, but also for our international credibility. And that's why in the Liberal Democrats, we're encouraging the government to embrace our idea of defence bonds, which would see both individual and corporate investment, bringing private sector funding into it, which we think could raise £20 billion to really help plug that gap.
But wouldn't that increase our national borrowing figures?
There's lots of things that challenge that, but this is all about bringing in funding that wouldn't necessarily do that, because it wouldn't be a PFI deal in quite the conventional sense, and it has precedent in the Second World War of individual citizens making a contribution towards a defence as well as private companies.
If I may, Ollie, look, I am a bit of a fiscal credibility hawk, right? Like I've worked in the Treasury, I've worked in finance ministries across the country, I've been in finance ministries across the world. You can't take borrowing and just call it not borrowing. Like it is still borrowing, and look, you can call it something special and you can try and get a lower interest rate, but you can do all sorts of things, but fundamentally it's still borrowing. And most importantly, the markets will not turn around and say we're just going to not count this. Like that's not how it works. Like, the thing that will matter at the end of the day is what is the quantity of bonds you're producing, what's inflation, what's interest rates, what's growth. And the reason why, to your point, I do talk about being a fiscal credibility hawk so much is because it is so important. Like I do want to transform this country. I do want to make life affordable. I do want to defend us. But we can't do those things if we make up magic numbers. Like we do have to be serious about it.
Well, I mean, I think you need to impart some of that wisdom to your colleagues in the Department for Transport, because there's all sorts of talk about the marvels of private finance that will solve all sorts of railway and road funding problems. So, it doesn't seem to be a universally embraced principle in the current Labour government.
So what exactly are you referring to?
The government is talking excitedly in some of the King's Speech bills about private finance for highways, and certainly the rail minister is always talking about continuing to use rolling stock leasing companies, which are very expensive in terms of funding trains because you're having to pay back a lot of that debt, and also including even electrification in that. So there certainly seems to be a willingness to embrace private sector funding in other areas, and defence is probably more important than anything else.
Of course, the private sector will fund various things. The way the private sector buys bonds, right? The point I'm making, and the point that's very, very clear, is you cannot take borrowing as a bond and say it's not borrowing. Like, it is borrowing, right? And the markets will not turn around and say, don't worry, it's fine, we're going to ignore it. Like, it's not going to happen that way. So if you issue the bonds, like, you have to have a credible path of paying for it. Now, look, you might be saying, I think we should be borrowing £20 billion more for defence. That's a perfectly reasonable proposition, perfectly reasonable position, but that is the position you have. You can't just carve it out and say it doesn't exist.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it is a way of funding, in addition to the normal public sector borrowing that we have, that would help to plug that gap, because at least we're suggesting some solutions and some new ways of financing that defence investment plan, rather than just announcing it and saying, oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll worry about how we're going to plug the gap in a few months when we have the budget.
Right. Well, let's break up the boys' club here. Bring in Lucy.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeevan talks a good talk for a hawk, but I don't think I don't think he is actually that hawkish. I mean, if you remember the last Labour budget, it was quite a circus, and you saw Labour sort of grappling around in the dark, trying to find evidence of growth. There was nothing in the last budget, and what they did bring out was they pointed towards the Fingleton Review, which was a nuclear review trying to make nuclear power stations quicker to build, infrastructure quicker to build. But unfortunately for the Labour Party, they've shot themselves in the foot, because they're going to realign with the EU, with Keir Starmer's dynamic realignment.
We're slightly going away from the question, which was on the Defence Investment Plan, and the fact that Andy Burnham wasn't told about the black hole.
Yeah, so in that, I mean, he hasn't got a lot of options. There's been some talk about releasing everybody from the triple lock, which I find quite interesting, because I think maybe those on the right would probably say it's a necessary sort of thing to get done. And if the Labour Party were to kind of break that gridlock, I think it sort of starts to open up a few, ability to start moving the economy in a direction that could actually create growth. So it would be interesting to see what each party does there. I mean, obviously the Conservatives are still very much aligned with triple lock.
Well, all the parties are.
Reform. Apart from Restore, which is interesting.
Yeah, do we count them as a major party?
But we don't count them, but we consider what they're saying in terms of getting the younger vote. And that will become an increasingly big issue for younger people as they start to feel the pressure of those increasing student loans, of those increasing costs on housing, cost of inflation. And these questions will start to be asked, especially around the triple lock. And I am assuming that there will be a conversation about it at some point within the next few months.
Okay. Caroline.
Well, should I try and answer the question?
I think that'd be a good idea.
Sorry, that wasn't intended to be a slight of any kind. But it's about this unfunded element in Keir Starmer's announcement. I mean, he made a great fuss, rightly so, that the last government made announcements without showing where they were going to be funded. And here he is doing the same. And, you could say, well, he's going to use that slightly mythical, often disappearing headroom that, you sometimes have, depending on where the economy's going in the budget. But, it's not a good look, and it does look like more of the same. And, if you're going to be long-term, which is what Andy Burnham was saying, that he wants to be long-term, not short-term, then you actually have to start putting your money there for the long term. And so, I think it's not surprising that trust is evaporating from government. And I would say, looking back at my book as well, that, we are in a really critical moment. And when I heard Andy Burnham say earlier that, this is our last chance, this is a crisis of trust. I think that's true. And people aren't stupid. They're watching this and seeing that, Starmer's just trying to get through those last moments with a bit of sort of the appearance of government, but without actually doing the job properly. And that may be harsh, but I think that's what people will think.
Now, Jeevan, recognising that as a PPS you are a member of the government and therefore you can't sort of go off on some trail that I might like you to go off on. It does seem on the face of it to be a bit rum for the Prime Minister not to tell the next Prime Minister, well, actually, there's a 15 billion black hole here and you're going to have to fill it. And he only discovers it once he's read the small print.
Well, yeah, obviously, I don't know the conversation that's going on between Keir and Andy and what was discussed and what, in one sense, what will be discussed going forward. I'm assuming as part of access talks, this will be part of it in terms of what will have to be funded at the budget. I think the Chancellor's position was basically, I'm the Chancellor today. If I came back to the budget in the end of the year, I would take the 1 billion in a year and I would find the money at that particular point in time, depending on where the forecast is. That's what the Chancellor's position would have been at this period of time. I do take the point, but I think that's what the Chancellor would be setting out if she was sat here where I am today.
Very well put, if I may say so. The tightrope was well walked. You'll go far. I've always said so since the first time you appeared on the programme. Right, we'll take some more questions in just a moment with our panel. It's 8:30 on LBC. Time for the news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
Andy Burnham says he'll stick by Labour's 2024 general election manifesto and the promises that it made. However, the PM in waiting says he believes there is some room within that manifesto for movement on tax. He also said he's not indisciplined on finances.
I was in the Treasury. I ran the Department of Health and we had it was tight, but we had a very healthy set of finances. I've run Greater Manchester, the fastest growing city region in the country, for a decade. And you can't make it the fastest growing city region in the country, Andrew, without strong business confidence.
One of the victims of 2 teenage boys who was spared jail for raping her but have now been detained say justice has finally been done. The 15-year-olds who can't be named because of their age will be held for 4 years after their sentences were ruled unduly lenient. And the victims of forced adoption in England and Wales have received a state apology from the Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer's described the practice, which saw 185,000 babies taken from their mothers, as a stain on our history. LBC weather tonight, a stray shower in West Scotland, otherwise dry for most with clear spells developing, lows of 7 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We're asking why Nigel Farage has been making hundreds of thousands of pounds flogging gold. Should he really be making so much money outside of politics? And, after his temper tantrum on various media outlets last week, a recent reform slump in the polls and a rise in popularity for Kemi Badenoch, is it looking like the Farage bubble could be set to burst?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, a text question from Rico in Kingsbury. Andy Burnham was already getting defensive about cutting benefits. Does this show that he too is too scared of Labour MPs to do anything about the huge amount of money being given to people who aren't working? Now, Andy Burnham told Andrew Marr that he's not going to go with crude cuts to benefit levels that then just put people who are struggling in even worse poverty, and will instead focus on new ways to get young people into work, such as apprenticeships, better mental health support, and to keep people in work, and also building more council homes. Well, the latter is something new, but the rest, Keir Starmer would argue that his government's already doing. Jeevan?
Well, first and foremost, I want to dispel this notion that Labour MPs are not around here for Labour welfare reform. Like, clearly they felt the last set of proposals were not adequate to the task that we have. Now, in terms of where we are today, think about the rise in, for example, social security expenditure. The Conservatives were not exactly soft and cuddly. Like, they tried to make lots of cuts to universal credit. They tried to make lots of cuts all over the place, including on working tax credit.
You're not allowed to attack the Conservatives anymore, Stephen. Get with the agenda.
The important point here is this, Ian. The important point is this. While they made cuts in that area, people moved on to other social security payments, i.e. if you're not having a wage, people live decent lives, you're not going to get down that social security expenditure either. And so from my perspective, and I believe my colleagues' perspective, is you make sure people are healthy, especially for young people who are going into the world, and part of that is banning social media, and part of that is ensuring their conditions of life are better, and you're ensuring they have training and jobs to go into. Like, fundamentally, if you sort out the labour market, you look after the good jobs problem, your welfare bill takes care of itself.
Lucy?
Yeah, well, I think, it's quite obvious. Your national insurance increases has meant that you can't employ young people. No one wants to take a risk on them. So quite frankly, I think a reversal of that is what you need.
But of course, that doesn't apply to young people.
But even so, it means the market has a situation where you don't want to take on new people and doesn't create more jobs because people aren't expanding their businesses. So quite clearly, that was the wrong tax to increase. I don't think you should be increasing many taxes, but that is particularly the one you shouldn't if you wanted more businesses to take on more people. And it's basic maths. And I'm surprised that, the Labour Party just can't get their head around that sort of concept. Firstly,
again, the national insurance rise did not apply to young people, right? It didn't stop young people being employed
just ignored what I said, though.
Going forward, though, on the other side of it, like, we did see a situation where employment was rising and is rising, more people in work.
I don't think that's
true.
Now,
let's talk about the unemployment figure in particular. I think the unemployment figure is really important here. Mm-hmm. What you have seen is more people leave inactivity going into looking for work. So you've seen both employment and unemployment rise as inactivity has fallen. So we've got a good record in terms of where we are on employment.
Inactivity, those are just words.
They're not words.
We're looking at outcomes. We are looking at outcomes, and outcomes are important.
And the outcome here is more people in work.
I don't think that's true. I think the numbers are actually quite poor for people in employment.
We've got phones here with us, right? Look at the employment numbers now. Like, go onto the labour market statistics and you'll see the employment number has risen since the election.
And productivity?
Yeah, productivity has also risen, and actually is particularly strong in the last couple of quarters. Like, we've got a good news story on productivity. What I think is slightly frustrating is what's going to happen when the Iran figures hit, basically, because I think there is going to be a hit on that side. But it is fair to say that, Iran's going to have an impact on this stuff.
I suppose one point here is that if you impose a national insurance increase of that scale, inevitably that's going to hit unemployment. But when you also combine it with the rise in the minimum wage for younger people, that means particularly in hospitality, it's less attractive to employ younger people. So I think that's kind of where you were heading with that, Lucy, wasn't it?
Yeah, but again, the NI increase didn't apply to them. And on the other side...
No, but I'm saying combined with the two, from an employer's point of view, it means that if your overheads are going to go up with a minimum wage for younger people and national insurance for everyone over the age of 21, then inevitably you're going to employ fewer younger people.
And the other side of that is we had to make investments, right? So the other side of it is how do we get spending up as well? And it's fair to say that we had to ensure that we pay for these things. And you're right, there's a trade-off there, right? There's a trade-off between, for example, how you funded the NHS, ensuring young people aren't sick, and ensuring how you're going to raise that money. And we raised that money in a way that didn't take money out.
You raised that money and it all went to the resident doctors. I mean, that's the problem. And it didn't actually go to improving healthcare. It just went in extra wage costs.
But hold on, retaining staff, it's odd. I think it's odd, Ian, sometimes. You talk about the private sector, you go, right, we need to pay private sector staff to retain them.
I'm just pointing out a fact that the money went on a 29% pay rise for resident doctors.
But you need to pay doctors to retain them. You need to pay people
absolutely.
What they're worth. So, but absolutely, the outcome that you have.
But you didn't give 29% to nurses. You didn't give 29% to ancillary workers in the NHS. Just the resident doctors. But anyway, I'm taking you slightly off the subject here. So we want to hear from Ollie and Caroline. Ollie.
Just want to just say a little bit about Lucy's point about the increase to employers' national insurance contributions. I think your point is right, Ian. It's the cumulative impact of all of those things, plus huge concerns about business rates and rising energy costs. And I think it's really important that those of us in politics who have not run our own business take the time to really listen and learn from them and understand what the barriers are from their perspective to hiring more people. But coming back to welfare and benefits, I mean, I think maybe this is an area where Andy Burnham's intentions to work more cross-party could be a really good opportunity, because every government comes in thinking they're going to crack this nut and trying to bring in radical change. They tend to row back from that, whereas really we need to better understand the many reasons why people aren't entering the workplace. In some cases, it will be a lack of willingness. Other people, it will be issues accessing healthcare. I mean, at a constituency surgery recently, a constituent was talking to me about the Access to Work scheme and how underfunded that is. And putting more money into that would really help employers to make the adaptations to enable people with disabilities to come into work. So it's a complicated topic, and it's probably one where we should be trying to forge a cross-party consensus.
I mean, Caroline, Andy Burnham has got a track record on cross-party working here. When he was Health Secretary, he did work with the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats on trying to find a way forward on social care. So I wonder whether that's indicative of how he might play the welfare issue.
I really hope so. I mean, he's talking about working across parties, and one of the reasons why the social care issue hasn't been resolved is that there have been these party political differences, and it's a long-term change. It's going to go across administrations. You know, it's like pensions reform. Earlier under the Blair government. So you do need to get that kind of consensus. I mean, the other thing I'd like to highlight about what he's saying about welfare is, it's very easy to announce cuts to welfare. I think David Cameron announced cuts to welfare, but they never actually happened. They became lines in the budgets which made them balance for the immediate consumption of the markets and so forth. But to really change unemployment, or to take another example, disabled people who are not able to get into work, you need to have much more sustainable long-term solutions. And to do that, you need to join up government. And one of the things that I think that is a very necessary reform for government is for the Treasury to take a much more holistic, joined up approach to how it looks at its spending, both in terms of joining up the different departments and thinking across the piece, like the Blair government did with Sure Start. It invested in Sure Start, which had benefits for different departments, but they took the risk. So they need to do that, but they also need to look to the longer term. So if you're just looking at to the next budget line for the next budget and not thinking about the next 10 years, then you make these apparent sweeping changes, but it never really happens. So I think what he's talking about a long-term approach, which is preventative, is really good, but we need to see more of it. And I think in some ways, that means thinking about expenditure in a different way.
Yeah, can I pick up? I think Caroline's actually completely right. I can't wait to read the book, by the way. But like a particular cut around 2017, the 2-child limit, right? And they had the 2-child limit in, and what we saw was food bank parcels went up from 1 million in 2017 to about 3 million when we came into government. A lot more hungry kids, a lot more kids who are malnourished, but also kids who were learning less. Kids who are learning less then and earning less today, if they're in work at all. So completely right, and I completely agree. Quite often with the last government, what was the problem in austerity? You had cuts in one area that led to more expenditure elsewhere, more needs elsewhere, a general degradation, a general decline in productivity, and a poorer nation as a result. And a poorer nation as well becomes more divided, because as people are angry at their material conditions, they look around and go, why is that the case? We've always had Farages, we've always had Tommy Robinsons, but now we have an era when actually these people are having purchase because people are so angry at what they've spent through, and that is what we're trying to address. And for us in particular, at this moment, I would say this: together we will get through this moment, but divided we absolutely won't, and cuts will absolutely divide us.
Caroline, I don't know if you talk about this in the book, but if you talk to cabinet ministers or even other junior ministers, they generally, unless they work in the Treasury, consider the Treasury at the root of all evil, that the Treasury stops them doing what they want to do, what they think should be done in their departments. There has been speculation that Andy Burnham might rip apart the Treasury, and we've heard this quite a few times over the decades. I mean, it only happened once under Harold Wilson, where he created a Department of Economic Affairs. Do you think that would be a wise way forward for the Treasury to effectively be neutered?
No, briefly. But I worked for 9 years in the Treasury, and I've got a whole chapter called Rewiring the Treasury in Bad Governments. So as part of that, I redesigned the public expenditure system under Gordon Brown and tried to make it longer term and separated out capital expenditure so it wasn't, raided. So we didn't stop underinvesting in
effectively doing what Keir Starmer's doing now.
Sorry.
Well, he's raiding capital expenditure budgets to fund the defence investment plan.
Well, I mean, but most of it is capital expenditure actually. So he's taking it out of the right budget. But George Osborne removed that protection from the capital budget. So actually, a lot of capital projects were cut in order to fund just to balance the budget over the next year. And it resulted, for example, in massive underinvestment in the NHS on capital infrastructure, which has badly reduced its productivity. So, I know that you can change the system in the Treasury. I've done it under, a Chancellor who was committed to doing that.
And Jeevan, you've worked in the Treasury. You're nodding away.
So you can change it. I mean, people talk about Treasury orthodoxy, but actually it comes from the ministers. I was part of something called the Early Action Task Force, which was arguing that the Treasury.
Exciting.
Well, it's more exciting than maybe it sounds. It was about it was a cross-sectoral initiative, arguing that we actually need to invest more in prevention. And I spent many years talking to Treasury officials who were really interested in the ideas in there. But they said, oh, well, George Osborne's just not interested in that. So I think, what you need is a Prime Minister who is interested in that. Now, if you separate out, the responsibilities for the economy, economic growth and expenditure, I think that's a really, really bad move. Right. Because actually, and it comes back to your point earlier about austerity, expenditure does affect growth. So if you cut a lot of these budgets, for example, the NHS or all sorts of budgets, they actually have an effect on the economy. It's not just capital infrastructure that makes the economy grow. So, I'd say keep it as it is, but actually change how it works.
Right, we've got a very important question coming up next, and of course we'll have our fun question at the end, which I know Ollie Glover is looking forward to, even if he doesn't know it. It's 8:46.
This is LBC.
Two rapists from going to jail suffer some consequences for this. Should all his previous judgments now be questioned too? Now, the Court of Appeal has today detained the two teenage rapists for 4 years for their crimes against two girls aged 14 and 15, after ruling the previous sentences, which had spared them jail, were unduly lenient. Our reporter, Benji Hire, has spoken with the parents of one of the victims, and you'll hear their words with Nick Ferrari at breakfast tomorrow morning from 7 here on LBC. Lucy, let's start with you.
Yeah, no, I did a bit of... I looked at this before I came on the show, and two things really stood out to me with the conclusion that came today. And the judge, there were some queries over the seriousness. He judged the seriousness of the rapes based on whether the girl had had some sort of relationship with the boys beforehand as a reason to sort of demote any sort of serious consequence for retaining the child. But also what he did is that there was like no knife involved in one of the incidences, so he didn't think it was as serious as previously thought. And then another incident that it was sort of discussed that he praised some of the defendants, and then also he looked at the concept of harm and who was harmed more. And there was this idea that the boys would be harmed more if they were to go into detainment over a long period of time, potentially over the girls who had suffered these rapes. And you are sitting there, and I'm sitting there as a woman thinking, why is he placing more harm on that than a rape to a girl who is going to live with this for the rest of her life?
Do you think his previous judgment should now be questioned?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that. It's there's a petition out right now with about over 300,000 signatures, basically calling into an investigation of this judge to look at other previous issues and sort of see whether there is something there.
Caroline?
Well, I think there is a case for looking at previous judgments, but I think here the Court of Appeal said that he erred in two important respects, and suggesting that it wasn't the actual guidance that was wrong, but it was the judge. So I think that at the very least, we need to get some better training for judges and root out anyone who has some sort of institutional bias.
Yeah, well, look, as a politician, I wouldn't go and talk about individual judges. Clearly the judgment had to change, and I agree it was far too lenient. I'm glad it's more punitive now. I do agree with Caroline here as well, which is how do you ensure this kind of thing and judgment doesn't happen again? It's such a shocking crime. It's so horrific. There's two sides of it. There's the prevention side, but also on the judgment side, yeah, I do agree. You've got to think about training, and you've got to think about guidelines, and you've got to think about standards, but it's clearly horrific.
Ollie?
Yeah, I think I broadly agree with Jeevan. And first, our thoughts have to be with the victims and their families who went through terrible things even before the judgment that they understandably found so outrageous. My view would be maybe, I don't know what the processes are, I've never worked in law, but maybe someone whose experience should be peer reviewing this particular judge's thought process and decision making, and maybe that person could also look at decisions made in the past.
Could I just say, and I think if we take a step back here, this kind of ties into the conversation we were having earlier. What is the fundamental issue of where power lies? And we have a process here, a legal process, where we have lots of rules, regulations, understandings, clauses, and ultimately a decision has to be made. And that is often a moral decision or a political decision. And when you have a judge that has all of the rules laid out, and I did listen very closely. I have a terrible memory, so I can't remember all offhand. But ultimately, he had to make a decision. And his decision looked like he was prioritising the boys over the girls. And so it goes back to that thing. Do judges make political decisions? Do judges make moral decisions? And where do we intervene? We cannot do legal processes to find morality, which is Keir Starmer found that out. He's someone who was very in the books, read everything and thought that if he just read more, he'll eventually come to the right answer. And I think in society, we have to take a step back and say technocracy and relying on the law is not a replacement for having societal morality.
Right, let's go to James in Ayr. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian. Tomorrow is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, United States. And it's an open question, really, to the panel. I wonder where the panel thinks the United States now sits with its Western allies, and perhaps where the United States sits with itself. I don't know if any of your panel members are familiar with a very short poem written in the Statue of Liberty, but it certainly is in that country now. So it's really an open question to your panel.
Right, well, ahead of next week's NATO summit in Turkey, Donald Trump has today posted on Truth Social with a list of what member states are spending on defence, calling it ridiculous that the US spends so much more than any other member state. Though, while he mentions how much Poland spends, he doesn't mention that it spends a greater percentage of its total public spending than the US does. Right, quick answers on this one. Caroline?
What the first question about? Yeah. Well, I think that, America's taking a dangerous turn. And, we've seen it as the sort of leader of the sort of the Western, free world. But I think that Trump we've lost confidence under his leadership that America can fulfil that role. So I think that it is really a kind of watershed moment. And, for Europe, it means that we have to look much more to ourselves.
Ollie?
I broadly agree with Caroline. We don't know whether Trump is an aberration or if this signals a longer-term trend in America's direction, more isolationist, more American first. And absolutely, we need to look more closely to Europe. And that is exactly why we in the Liberal Democrats are calling for us to rejoin the customs union and the single market as part of a comprehensive economic, defence and security partnership with the European Union, because we cannot rely on America any longer.
Oh, I can feel the heat from Lucy.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Disagree. So I think with America, I think everyone's sort of waiting for Trump to leave, and you can sort of see almost there is an aggression or a distrust from that type of politics that I think it's caught everyone by surprise, even for those of us on the right. It sort of feels like this is more than we expected. And you can see that there is his number two, sorry, I've forgotten his name. Vance, yes. He's gone in for negotiations with Iran, and it feels like he's trying to calm the situation down. So that does signal that there is an element of moderate behaviour behind the scenes.
Stephen?
I think European NATO will have to do more to prepare to defend ourselves. Like, that's the blunt truth of where we are, and you're seeing rearmament take place across Europe, both because we have to act on our own, but also defend ourselves from Russia. I would say, although there is clearly a step change with Donald Trump, this also, pivot from the United States did also begin much earlier, i.e. the Americans were looking at the Pacific and saying to Europe, you need to defend yourselves because we have other interests around the world, not least of which is we have to deal with the rise of China as well.
And that started with Barack Obama, if you remember. Interesting text here from somebody who says, say no to Canada in Eurovision. We won't ask our panel about that one. James, thank you for that. We are going to get the 3 questions before our fun question. Well done to all of you. Barry says, do you think anyone who wants to give themselves next Monday morning off work or school should have the right to do so? Well, after 9 o'clock, we're going to be discussing England manager Thomas Tuchel's comments where he's told parents to let their kids have Monday off school after they stay up through the night to watch England's match against Mexico from 1 a.m. But government ministers have pushed back against this and said that kids should be in school. Ollie?
I'm with the government on this. I don't think we should be giving people time off school or work, however passionate people are for football. Those of us who get our kicks from elections as junkies, we don't get time off from school or work for those, and neither should we. So I think we should have some consistency.
Oh my God,
here.
You've just lost the dressing room.
Nice one. Well, look, if it's super hot, they're going to get it off anyway. So let's hope it's a super hot Monday.
I was going to say, a bit like you have.
Yeah.
Caroline?
Well, I don't think you can police this. I don't think you can stop people from, deciding to take the Monday morning off. So, but we certainly shouldn't be closing schools.
Jeevan?
Yeah, we're obviously not going to close schools, but people should stay up or find some way to watch the match.
Even 8-year-old kids?
I'm not going to tell parents how to raise their kids.
I'm sure I could think of examples of where governments do tell parents how to raise their kids, and in some ways quite rightly so. Right, our fun question is from Alexandra in Lewis. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are getting married inside New York's Madison Square Garden tomorrow. If you could celebrate a life event inside a famous landmark somewhere around the world, which landmark would it be? Lucy?
Well, I used to live in Turin for a while, so Superga, which is this very big church on the top of a hill. I'd probably, if I could, get married there.
Okay, Ollie?
A very difficult choice, but I think I'm going to go with the Alhambra in Granada, in Spain, just because the history and the incredible gardens and water features a very historic and tranquil environment.
I thought you were going to say Didcot Railway Station.
Well, that would be my second choice.
Stephen? You did get married recently.
We did get married. We got married in a barn, effectively. So, but it was absolutely brilliant. It is the best day of your life. I wish I could have that again. Anyway, sorry, the actual
you
question
might do
was...
in the future, depending on... Corey and Chris are shaking their heads in disbelief.
They're right to shake their heads, Ian. They're right to. There's Sagrada Familia, the Barcelona
Sagrada
Cathedral.
Familia. Yeah.
There we go, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona.
Okay, Caroline?
Well, I'm going to be boring. I got married 36 years ago in Westminster, St Margaret's of Westminster, opposite Westminster Abbey, and I think that's the best place to get married if you're interested in government.
I got married in Wadhurst Castle in Sussex, which was lovely, and I would quite like to do it again too, so you can get your own back now. Right, thank you all very much indeed. Really good episode of Cross Question. Now, on Monday, our panel includes former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir Ranil Jayawardena, Labour MP Alex Sobol, plus the broadcaster and former England footballer Eni Aluko. We are going to change the subject. Well, we're not going to change the subject because we've just discussed it. We are going to ask you in the next hour, if you have kids who are begging you to let them stay up on Monday to watch England against Mexico at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City, what's your response going to be? Because Thomas Tuchel thinks you should let them. Now, my view is very simple, that everyone has a right to watch an England match, whether they are 4, 5, 6, 56, 86 years old. And I think you're a bad parent if you don't let them watch it. But you've got to make them go to school as well. So that's the happy compromise. But also, what about people who think they should have a day off work? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Andy Burnham's told LBC he has plans to change taxes while sticking to Labour's 2024 manifesto. The Makerfield MP has spoken to LBC in his first broadcast interview since his by-election win. He said there is a case for higher business rates on warehouses and the major developments on the outskirts of our cities. He says he'll use that money to fund a 20% cut on business rates, as well as to lift some high street businesses out of business rates altogether.
Looking at things where I can make a change that answers some of the issues that we see up and down high streets across Britain. But overall, people can be certain of one thing of me. I read some of the commentary. I am not indisciplined when it comes to the public finances.
Andy Burnham's also told LBC that he was not included in the recent discussions about the government's defence investment plan. It comes after Sir Keir Starmer unveiled a £15 billion defence spending uplift over the next 4 years, but left almost £5 billion of that to be found at the next stage of the budget.
I didn't have all of the details. I wasn't in all of the discussions, but I regard it as something that the country has to face up to very seriously. We're in a changing world. The nature of the threat is changing. What I can say to you tonight is I will take my responsibilities fully to fund the defence investment plan. If I'm in the position to do so, I will take those responsibilities extremely seriously. No compromise.
In other news, 2 teenage boys who were initially spared jail for the rape of 2 young girls have now been detained for 4 years. The Court of Appeal has ruled their original sentences were unduly lenient. Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr explained why.
Each incident involving rape by more than one offender was extremely serious. But the fact that they repeated their behaviour after the first incident and did it again to a different person in the second incident is the crucial feature of these cases.
And pubs across England and Wales will be allowed to stay open until 5 a.m. on Monday for England's World Cup match. They play Mexico from 1 a.m. UK time. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 174 points at 10,652. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.16. LBC weather dry for most tonight with some clear spells developing, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Very good evening, 9:04 on LBC. Hope you enjoyed that edition of Cross Question. I think it's one of the best we've done over the last month or two. Right, let's talk about, we don't talk about football on LBC, but if we did, we would be talking non-stop for the next 4 days about England's match on Monday against Mexico in the World Cup. It's the round of 16. And this is really when it starts to get serious. And England have had a bit of a checkered run so far. Brilliant performance in the second half against Croatia. Ghana, not so much. Congo, well, it was a bit of it was not the best performance, but we squeaked through in the end. But the Mexico match is going to be, I think, an absolutely phenomenal occasion because it's going to be played in the world-renowned Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. But the kickoff time is 1:00 in the morning on Monday morning. And of course, this has led to a lot of views from people as to whether parents should allow their children to stay up because they will have school the next morning. I remember, maybe you can say, well, you can't really compare the two things, but I can remember when I was 7 years old in 1969, and my dad got me out of bed and brought me downstairs to watch the moon landing and when Neil Armstrong took his first steps on the moon. And I just think to myself, well, imagine if he hadn't done that. That's really the first thing that I can really remember from my childhood in many ways. It had a huge impact on me on our sort of small black and white television at home. I knew even at that young age this was a major thing. Now, you can't compare a football match to that, I suppose. But if your 6-year-old is a mad football fan, do you really have the right to deprive them of the experience of watching possibly England's most meaningful match for many, many years? I don't think you do. I think you should let them. Now, I'm not a parent. I don't have to make this decision. I know what's going to happen in my house at 1:00 on Monday morning. I'm going to be kicked out of the living room to go and watch it in my bedroom because my partner hates football and won't watch it on the television in the living room. So you can tell he wears the trousers in my house, can't you? And also, what about if you've got work in the morning? Say your name happens to be Nick Ferrari. When you know you've got to get up, I don't know what time Nick Ferrari gets up, but he has to start his programme at 7 a.m. So I assume he's up sort of probably 4 or 5 a.m. in order to do his programme. Is he really not going to watch the England match? I suspect he'll just pull an all-nighter. Not for the first time, I suspect, in his life. I don't say that as criticism. I say that out of envy. So what are you going to do? Both if you've got work the next day or if you have children, anywhere between the ages of, 4 and 16, because, of course, we are, July, I suppose, all the GCSEs finished now, so I suppose they have. So you could argue, well, older children, they should be allowed to anyway. But what about younger children? Do you think that they should be allowed to watch the match and then go to school, even if they've only had, say, 3 or 4 hours sleep? Well, during his post-match press conference yesterday evening, the England manager, Thomas Tuchel, was asked this question.
We spoke yesterday about the kids being able to watch the game tonight because of the kick-off time. Have you got a message maybe for their parents who now have to try and get them to go to sleep after that?
Write an excuse for school and let them watch football. Come on, there's so much school to go to, but World Cup is every 4 years. Let them watch. There will be a big match on in 4 days, and we need the support of everyone and especially of the children.
Now, earlier this evening, my LBC colleague Tom Swarbrick asked the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, if she thinks parents should do that.
I'm pleased we've now got the option of that 1 a.m. Game, even though I know it might be a bit of a challenge for some parents as they try and navigate and negotiate with their children around bedtimes and what's possible. I'm not going to get involved in what parents decide to do. They'll do what's right and best for their families, but kids should be in school on Monday.
Okay, even so, parents should not take their children out of school on that Monday, even if they stay up and watch the game.
Look, I think children should be in school. That's where they ought to be. You can watch the game, have fun. I know it's a late kick-off. I think a lot of children are probably going to struggle to stay up that late, full stop. I mean, we struggle to stay up past 11 o'clock, trying not to fall asleep on the settee watching some of those later games. So 1 o'clock's probably going to be a bit of a stretch for a lot of families and for a lot of children, but I hope they can enjoy it.
Alison Colwell joins me, education commentator and secondary school head teacher, and has been dubbed Britain's strictest head. I think there's a bit of competition for that accolade. She's also the author of the book No Excuses, Turning Around One of Britain's Toughest Schools. Alison, very good evening. What's your view on this?
Good evening, Ian. And do you know, I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming on. I think it was about 15 years ago that I first pulled up over on the A2 to talk to you about education issues, and it was about this. It was about children not being. It was about holidays. It was about not missing school. It was about not being any reason not to. And nothing has changed. So I'm a bit of a broken record. And actually, you just said, is the moon landing the same as a football match? It obviously isn't. And I was talking to my friend this evening when I said I was going to be on this. Derek, give you a shout out, and he just kind of summed it up. It said, "Watch the football, go to school, deal with it, just be a bit tired." What is the issue here?
Well, the issue is whether young children can really do that, whether they can watch a match and then get 2 hours sleep and then go to school in any meaningful way and actually benefit from school the next day, I suppose.
No, they can. Of course they can. And if they can't, not every child wants to watch this. I'm all for watching it. I think it's great. I don't think I'll be watching it, but this is not. I don't understand why this has become such a major sort of conversational piece, because there isn't really. What is the debate? The Education Secretary earlier saying, yes, should children be in school after the match? Of course they should. Should children be allowed to sit up and watch it, like, waiting for Santa Claus or their birthday or something, or the moon landing, as you said? Yes, of course. No, no one died of tiredness ever, did they? Can we just say you can have a day off school because of something? No, that way madness lies, and you know this.
Well, I'm not suggesting that anyone should have a day of school. I'm certainly not suggesting that the government should declare some sort of bank holiday. Even if we win the World Cup on July, was it the 19th, I think? 19th, I don't think there should be a day of national celebration, because not everyone is a football fan. And we've got an anemic economic growth as it is, and we can't afford the economic hit. I might sound a killjoy on that, but I don't think that warrants a bank holiday on that day. I mean, I suppose the next day is obviously the day that Andy Burnham takes over as Prime Minister, so maybe we should all be celebrating that. I don't know.
No, but that's the point, isn't it? This, as I said, I'm not sure why this has become such.
Well, it's become such a big thing because Thomas Tuchel's comments in that press conference.
Well, not in a rude way. Don't listen to him. Listen to the Education Secretary. Should children be in school after the is it Monday that after that? Yeah. Yes, and should they be allowed to sit up and late night and watch it if they want to? Absolutely. And should they be cheering and celebrating? Should all of us? Yes, but should kids miss school for anything other than if they are very, very ill? No, of course they shouldn't.
But what do you think? Let's say, for example, a parent of an 8-year-old decides that they are going to let the 8-year-old stay up and watch the football, but decides to not send them to school the next day. Should the schools, in that case, take some sort of action against the parents? Because they do, if they take them out of school in term time for a holiday, don't they? Which is effectively the same thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Should that parent be allowed to not be allowed to do that? Should that parent do that? No, I don't think they should. As I said, I've been a broken record on this all my life. I don't think parents should not take their children out of school for anything other than if their child is very, very ill. So if they allow their child to watch it, and that's great, let's do that, but sending them into school, send them in with bags under their eyes, send them in, and when they come home, go to bed early, but don't use it as an excuse, because that way, you're undermining the authority of school, you're undermining the authority of education. It's just not helpful.
Okay. I'll stop the broken record now, shall I? Alison, thank you very much indeed. That's Alison Colwell there. Her book is called No Excuses, Turning Around One of Britain's Toughest Schools, a school I actually had the pleasure of visiting. Right, Simon says, Ian, people should of course be allowed to use their annual paid leave to have a day off, and kids should of course go to school. Why penalise those that don't like football? I don't think anybody's suggesting that anybody should be penalised here. Ian, if you're up all night with a crying infant who can't settle, you still go to work. If you go out on a birthday bender, you still go to work. If you decide to have a midnight barbecue, you still go to work. Kids can learn how to cope with being tired sometimes and not flaking out. A very, very sensible view on life there. Dave says, unfortunately, I agree, Ian. Let the kids stay up to watch. They need to find out about losing as well as winning at an early age. Well, that's confidence for you, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, playing a professional sport at 2,000 metres above sea level, that is going to challenge England players, because up to now, I think I'm right in saying, I'm looking at Chris here for confirmation, I don't think we've played a match in terrible heat yet, have we? Many countries have, but we haven't. And I think this is going to be a real test of the England team's fitness, but I still believe. But then, of course, if we win that in the next round, we get Brazil, probably. But they're not very good in this World Cup, are they? I think we've got a better chance of beating Brazil than we have of Mexico, funnily. But we're not here to talk about football much. 9:15.
This is LBC.
I think this is I wish Scottish parents. Well, presumably, I mean, actually, no, this does have relevance to Scottish parents. He says, thinking of an angle. The angle is, of course, your match. One of them, I can't remember which one it was now. That was at 2 a.m. The first one against Haiti. That was a very early start, wasn't it? But I think that was at a weekend. So yeah, it was a Sunday morning. So actually, my evil way of getting you involved in this conversation hasn't quite worked out. But should young children be allowed to stay up and watch this match? Because a lot of them will have absolute heroes. I mean, Jude Bellingham has, I think, in this tournament become the hero of so many people of all different ages. And I think it's almost cruel, isn't it, to deprive a young child of seeing their hero in action. I'm told that Scotland did actually get bank holidays after all 3 games. So for the early hours of the Sunday match against Haiti, the Monday was then a bank holiday in Scotland. I mean, that's outrageous, isn't it? All 3 games. Well, the team could have actually repaid that loyalty a little bit better, couldn't they? I mean, because they were absolute pants. Anyway, having annoyed everyone in Scotland, Dean's in Cumbria. Hello, Dean.
Are you okay?
Hi, not too bad. What would you like to say?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm just not a big enough football fan to realise why it needs to be watched live at 1 o'clock. But I think there's a quite simple compromise that alleviates some of the sleep deprivation, which would be to simply watch it on demand at about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Just simply have a decent early night, get up, having not looked at your phone notifications.
Yeah, that doesn't work, though. That doesn't work because somebody is going to have texted you. Somebody, I've tried doing this myself, but it never works because somebody. It used to be my father who would always delight in saying, "Well, I'm not going to tell you what the result was, but Gaza had a good game."
And you switch the phone off. Just don't have it on until you've watched it.
Oh, well, I don't know. It's nothing like watching it live, though, is there, frankly?
I don't know. It would feel live to me if I was getting up at it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, still early to get up and give it a go. Do you know what I mean? It just feels those extra few hours. You wouldn't be going into school tired, would you?
Well, I think you're going to go, if you're a child, you're going to go into school tired whether you watch it live or whether you watch it on catch-up a few hours later. That is inevitably going to be the case. But look, if we want to teach children about what it's like to be adults in the workplace, there are always times when you have to. Depending on what your job is, sometimes you work late, and in various jobs I've had, I can remember where on this station where I've hosted an overnight programme for sometimes 8 or 10 hours. And then a few hours later, I've gone back on air. And the challenge is to keep your eyes open. But you do it. But I'm in a job where the adrenaline helps, I suppose.
Yeah, I get that. I just think when you're looking at school kids, they could still get a good 8 hours sleep if they have an early night, get up at 4 or 5, watch it while they're having their breakfast. Job done.
OK, thank you very much, Dean. Gareth says, it's easy. Record the football. Get the kids up at 6 a.m. They can watch it before going to school. I just don't think that is the same. I mean, if you're a football fan, you'll know exactly what I mean. If you're not a football fan, you'll think that's a perfectly reasonable suggestion. I just don't think that would work. But I may be wrong. Let's go to Dave in Enfield. Hello, Dave.
Hello there. Whenever we went abroad on a Monday, I made sure the kids slept in the afternoon on the Sunday. Why is it so difficult to put the kids to bed early and let them stay up in the morning? It doesn't make sense to me. It's so simple.
You could do that, but I think children...
We did every time.
But isn't it more...
Every time we go abroad.
Isn't it more difficult?
6 o'clock flight. And so they're up at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock and we take them.
But you can't just... Right, shall I start speaking now? Right, you can't just say to kids, right, you must go to sleep now. I think kids' sleeping patterns are very different from adult sleeping patterns.
Well, they knew if they're going on holiday with us, this is what they had to do. And that's what they did.
Well,
no comment, no argument. That's it. You want to go abroad with us on the flight, early morning flight? This is what you do. Otherwise, you stay at home. So easy.
I bet they knew that was an empty threat.
I mean, we do it every time we go abroad on the Monday morning, so early.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Dave. Roseanne says, if it was the final, then absolutely. But it's the no, it's not even the quarterfinals, it's the round of 16. And the adults have to go to work the next day. I don't think that matters. We are now at the serious stage of the tournament. And it could be England's last match in the World Cup. Mexico have done brilliantly so far. Yes, they're one of the host nations, so you would expect them to. But I think everybody who's watched any of their matches has been quite impressed with them. So this is probably going to be England's biggest challenge so far. And I think the whole nation will want to watch it. I feel quite sorry for whoever's presenting at 1 o'clock on Monday morning on LBC. That would be Richard Spur. Thoughts and prayers, Richard. Sean, I haven't heard from you for ages. Sean in concert.
Mate, how are you doing? Are you all right, mate?
I'm very well, thank you.
I spare a thought for the nurses and the hospitals and the police. Who's going to police this at 5 o'clock in the morning, like? You know what I mean? He's just turned around and said, oh, the pubs can stop open until 5 o'clock in the morning. Right, every pub.
So you think there'll be a lot of policing needed?
Honest to God, I think it's bloody lunatic.
Is this just in concert? You think that the extra policing will be needed?
Everywhere. The pubs are allowed to open till 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning.
But that's what we have a police force for.
But can you? How Ian might catch yourself on, right? At the end of the day, right? Who's going to police it? Spare a thought for them nurses in the hospital. There's been no thought about them, is there?
Well, I think you're stretching it a bit to think that this is going to have a massive impact on the NHS.
Well, you will do with common sense. If England get beat off Mexico, right, you're telling me that there's not going to be any trouble?
Well, no more trouble than there would be if it was an afternoon match, no.
I honestly think this is Starmer's last stupid way of saying goodbye, right? He's an idiot. This should never happen, This should not happen.
Well, I think if you're a publican, you'll be thanking Keir Starmer because it'll mean that you get some extra takings.
And as for the schools, where they shouldn't shut, the kids should.
No, I agree with that.
Right, but this is totally lunacy. Opening up at 5 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry, mate, it is.
Well, okay. Well, look, you're perfectly entitled to your point of view. I don't think it is. I think that, in Scotland... now, by the way, I've got to make a small correction. Well, it's actually quite a big correction. There was only one bank holiday in Scotland after the first game, but that one was indeed on a Monday after the game took place from 2 to 4 a.m. on the Sunday morning. The other games were on Friday night and at 11 p.m. and then Wednesday night from 11 p.m. So I'm glad to have cleared that up. Now, Sean, stay on the line.
I honestly think that when the World Cup finals on at 8 o'clock at night, I think that's when it's on. I think that's
I think you're right. So
I honestly think this is lunacy. 5 o'clock in the morning.
All right. Well, stay on the line, and because I want you to give Chris, my producer, your home address, and I have a reason for doing that. Because you get a mention in my autobiography, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, and I want to send you a copy.
Oh, can you sign it?
I will sign it. I absolutely will. Because I relate our first conversation on LBC. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, yes, I do. I don't think Thatcher would have loved it, but never mind.
No, but
I don't think any Tory would have liked it.
It amused me greatly. But that's not to say that's not to say that I can send a book to every single listener who has. Well, actually, not. There's only Sean and a few others I mentioned in the book, but and I will send one to the others. Sean, thank you very much indeed. Joseph says, I think if this match was the final and England were in the final, then I could understand letting children stay up to watch it. But this isn't the final. Well, no, that is patently obvious. Bash says, Ian, it's not the final, for God's sake. Well, these texts are getting a little bit repetitive, making the same point, but it's a fair point to make. Get up at 5 a.m. and watch it on catch-up, says Matt. And this one is from MC, who says, help me out, mate. I have a big 65-inch TV in the living room. Get you. I have a 50-inch TV in the dining area and a 55-inch TV in my bedroom. You are a one-man climate change hazard, aren't you? Not showing off, not much, but where do you think I should watch it? It's from Mickey in Croydon. Well, obviously on your 65-inch TV in the living room, if you're allowed to, unlike me. Get my drift? Another text here from Ben, who says, the problem is that it's right in the middle of the night. Send them to bed early and tell them to wake up at 5 and watch the recording. That way they can still get a solid 8 hours sleep. If they really like football, it would be worth it for them. Well, there seems to be a bit of a consensus that that's the way forward, to send the kids to bed much earlier than normal and then tell them to get up a little bit later and watch it on catch-up. I still don't think that they would go for that. Most people want to watch matches like this live, and I completely understand them wanting to do that. Gareth says, all these folk moaning about needing a day off because football's on late, they want to try doing a 6-month tour in Afghanistan with no sleep. Well, fair point to make. I don't think anybody's saying that people should have a day off. I'm certainly not saying that schools should close. I'm not saying that people should have a day off. Now, I'm quite lucky because I can lie in late because I don't have to work until later in the day. So, but not everyone. I mean, if you start work at, my best friend starts work at 7 o'clock in the morning. So he's probably not going to watch it, is he? Probably not. I don't know. And here's another text from, doesn't say, if it's anything like most of England's last game, the kids will fall asleep with boredom anyway. I know I did. I didn't fall asleep watching the Democratic Republic of Congo match. I refuse to call it DR Congo, DRC or Democratic Republic of Congo. I mean, that was a very challenging match for England, but it certainly wasn't boring. The Ghana one was. I mean, that was incredibly tedious. Right, we're going to take more of your calls in a minute. What is your solution to this? We haven't heard from any parents yet. Parents who have kids, say, between the ages of 4 and 14, are you going to let them stay up? Or are you going to get them to go to bed early? And what if you have to work the next day? Say you are someone like my friend who has to start work at 7 o'clock in the morning. Are you really going to stay up and go to bed? I mean, what if it goes to penalties? I mean, maybe 3:30 before that finishes. 0345 6060 973. We're also going to find out more about the emergency appeal for the Venezuelan earthquake. The death toll from the 2 earthquakes last week in Venezuela has now risen to well over 2,200. But the Disasters Emergency Committee of aid charities have revealed that people in the UK have now donated more than £7 million towards providing relief to the Venezuelan people. We'll get more on that in just a moment, and more of your calls on the footy. It's 9:30 on LBC. Time to get the news headlines from Daryl Jackson.
Andy Burnham has exclusively told LBC he will stick to Labour's manifesto promises, but believes there is some headroom to change taxes. The man most likely to replace Sir Keir Starmer says he'd like to introduce cuts to business rates. He also insists he hasn't chosen his cabinet, but wants to make it the most inclusive so all parts of his party can see themselves in it. 2 boys who were spared jail for the rape of 2 young girls in separate attacks have now been detained for 4 years each. The Court of Appeal has ruled their sentences were unduly lenient following a public outcry. And the Scottish and UK governments are facing calls to compensate the mothers who were forced to give up their children between the 1940s and 1970s. It follows a state apology made by Sir Keir Starmer, who described the practice as a stain on our history. LBC weather tonight, a stray shower in West Scotland, otherwise dry for most with clear spells developing, a low of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
Now, whenever there is a huge earthquake like this, and this was at the higher end on the Richter scale, that there are disaster emergency appeals that the government puts out, and British people have a tremendous track record in responding to these appeals. So let's find out what's happened with the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal for this earthquake. Saida Salam is Executive Director of the aid and humanitarian charity Concern Worldwide. Saida, thank you for joining us. Tell us where we are with this appeal and where the money is going.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And as you said, the scale of destruction is absolutely catastrophic. You know, there were 79,000 buildings that were destroyed to rubble in a matter of minutes, you know, including many, many schools. And as you said, we've got people sleeping outside in very unsanitary conditions. We've got thousands still trapped underneath the rubble. And the death toll is only very sadly set to rise. And it's against this backdrop that the Disasters Emergency Committee yesterday launched its public appeal. We are a very proud member of the Disasters Emergency Committee. We're 15 member charity organisations that come together at times of crisis. And for many of us, many of our member agencies, we were already there working in Venezuela. So we were there. Some of us, we've been there for decades, and we've been supporting in the backdrop of a very severe economic crisis where there's been high levels of need already. So what this earthquake has done is just really compounded those needs. It's meant that children are separated from their families, they're scared, people who are living with disabilities, often the most vulnerable. I heard today from one of our team about a grandmother, Rosa, who was carried by her son. She uses a wheelchair, carried by her sons to go and shelter in a sports hall. And while she's doing that, she's still supporting other members of her community. And I think this is what is so extraordinary about these aid efforts, the resilience and the capacity of local populations and everything that they are doing. Really, our job is to support them. So in terms of where the money goes, it goes on those life-saving basic essentials that people need right now. They need food, they need water, they need medicines, they need hygiene kits, they need shelter desperately from the sun and the tropical rains that are coming. And that's exactly what we're there to do. So as our 15 member agencies, we have agencies like the Red Cross as part of the appeal. They've been supporting on the search and rescue efforts. My own agency, Concern, we've been working with a partner, and we're distributing those essential items right now. We're able to get to people in need. We'll be working on water and sanitation. Other agencies will be working on setting up safe play areas for children, which sounds odd in the aftermath of an earthquake like this, but it's essential. It's essential to help those children recover, to keep learning, and to give families a little bit of respite so that they can start to rebuild themselves. But the scale of destruction is huge, and we are there, we are ready to respond, and that's exactly where the funds are going, right where they're needed.
So £7 million has been raised so far, presumably in the last 24 hours. What does the government contribute to this in terms of disaster relief?
Yeah, so it's a public appeal. And as you said, the people across the United Kingdom are so generous at times like this, and we could not be more thankful. The government has generously pledged to match up to 2 million of that money that is raised. And the Scottish government and the Welsh government have also contributed as well. So, we're very, very grateful for everyone's support. And as I say, that money gets straight to where it's needed and onto essential supplies. So £25, for example, could feed a family for a week with food rations and what they need, and £10 could help a family with a hygiene kit to make sure that they're not prone to illness. So it really makes a difference.
Do all other major developed countries have their equivalent of a disasters emergency committee appeal? And how do we fare in terms of, more generally, not just specifically to this appeal, but how do we fare in the amount of money that the British public gives compared to other countries? I know it's not a competition, it's not a race, but it'd be quite interesting to understand how generous our country is.
Our country is incredibly generous. There's also the Irish Emergency Alliance. There's an emergency alliance in Canada, and a number of other countries. And I would say that there is generosity across the world, and it's situations like this where you see really the best of global solidarity. I know there's been 50 search and rescue teams deployed, and huge levels of support, but support is needed because, as you say, this is a really massive catastrophe, and being able to see the difference that support makes and the support that the British public make, I'm left in awe and incredibly grateful for everything that we do.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. It's really important. I think everyone understands what's going on with these appeals. Just tell my listeners, if they want to donate, how they can do so through the DEC.
Thank you. So if you please go on to www.dec.org.uk, and then you can donate online there. And thank you very much to your listeners.
And it's very easy to do. Thank you very much indeed, Saida. That's Saida Salam, Executive Director of the aid and humanitarian charity Concern Worldwide. Right, let's go back to our discussion about whether parents should be allowing their young kids to watch the England match against Mexico at 1 a.m. on Monday morning. The consensus so far seems to be yes, but maybe send them to bed early so they can either get up to watch the match live or get up a bit earlier and watch it on catch-up. What are you going to do? And also, if you are somebody who is in a normal job that starts between 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning, are you going to take a day off work, unpaid, part of your holiday, or are you going to struggle in, and even though you may be a bit tired, just keep calm and carry on, as Churchill would have said? Ben is in Stevenage. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ian. Hi.
What would you like to say?
Well, I just thought it's more of a well, not a joke, but, I thought, give the kids a choice. You say if you want to watch the football, if you really want to watch it, you can. but you're going to be tired in the morning and you will have to go to school, and you can get them to sign a bit of paper that says they'll be up on time for school no matter what, and they can make their own minds up, can't they?
Yeah, and in a sense, it's teaching children to take responsibility for their own actions, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I thought, whatever the consequences the next morning, you'll figure out if you want to do that again.
Actions have consequences. That's what they're going to find out later in life, so they might as well find it out at the age of 7, I suppose.
Certainly, yeah.
And what do you think is going to happen? Do you think we'll get through?
Well, I'm not a football fan, but I only follow the football at times like this, the World Cup and Euros and stuff.
And you're a man. I mean, a lot of women say that they don't really watch the Premier League, but when there's a World Cup, they actually get quite interested in it. Yeah,
football's never been really my thing, but I can get behind it at times like this. From people that I know that are more into football, they don't seem too optimistic about us against Mexico. So we'll have to see.
We will see.
I was seeing about the elevation and the climate and stuff. So
yeah, I think that's apparently it's not going to be that hot. 23 degrees according to the weather forecast for Mexico City on Monday morning. Although of course there it will be early evening, I suppose. So, but it is. I think it's the altitude that is going to affect it. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. Let's take this text from Paul, who says, "Let's face it. If you send kids to bed early, they're going to secretly watch on the phones that they have talking to friends on the social networks they're not supposed to use. I'm willing to bet that Monday will be the one day of this academic year that has the highest sick absence in schools. I feel sorry for those who are genuinely ill on Monday and have to make that call to their work. Enjoy the game, everyone, wherever you get to see it." I think that is a good point, because if you are genuinely ill on Monday, everyone's going to just think you pulled a sickie, aren't they? So I think there'll be a lot of people probably go to work. Those of us who have this sort of puritanical work ethic, when on the rare occasions I have had days off work through sickness throughout my career, I've always felt incredibly guilty. I've always felt that everyone's going to just be thinking I'm not really ill, I just fancied a day off. And I can honestly look anybody in the eye and say I've never done that. But I remember there was a day when I did take a day off work because my back had gone. I literally couldn't get out of bed until 6 o'clock in the evening. But I still thought that everyone was going to sort of think the worst of me for doing it. And I don't know whether this is a peculiar thing to people in this country, but I know a lot of people who have that kind of attitude that they automatically feel guilty, even if it's completely legitimate to have a day off work ill. Sean is in Launceston in Cornwall. Hello, Sean.
Good evening, Ian. Your production team, presumably it is accidentally, but Paul, the text you just read out, has rather nicely pulled the rug from under.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right, no problem. I was ringing up to make exactly the same point. There's been in the news recently the push towards limiting social media for young people, and mum and dad send young person to bed. You've got school in the morning. Young person's quite likely to watch on his or her device, like Paul said. And I think that's probably where we're going to be heading to, Ian.
I mean, I don't know the answer to this question because I'm not a parent. I don't really have many friends who've got children of that age now. Do you let your 8-year-old, your 10-year-old take their phone to bed with them?
Unfortunately, I've got no children, unfortunately. But I think from my brother, who's got from my nephew, perhaps my nephew's 10, he's got access to his phone when he goes to bed. So I think young people will have it. Young people will undoubtedly, in my opinion, I've got nothing except anecdotal evidence. Will have access to the devices, really.
Well, that sort of opens up a whole new debate, doesn't it? Which we're not going to have tonight. If you're a parent, are you an irresponsible parent if you let your child take their phone to bed with them? I mean, I've got youngsters in the gallery nodding their heads at that. younger generation are very conservative with the small c in these things, aren't they? They're looking at me as skunts now. Right, let's go to a break. It's 9:45 on LBC.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
What should happen to the judge that failed to take child rape seriously enough? And Andy Burnham sits down for an exclusive interview with LBC. We'll bring you all the best bits.
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Never stayed up watching any of the matches that started, apart from the Scotland one. I don't think I saw any of them that were at 2 or 4. I recorded them all, and then I watched some of them early the next morning. But I never like to know the result of a match before I watch it. And of course, if you switch any of your phone on or anything like that, inevitably you're going to find out the score. Colin is in, as Bet Lynch would say, Tenerife. Hello, Colin.
Absolutely. Hello. Right. I have nothing to add to the conversation about the rights and wrongs of keeping kids up to watch the football. I've just got a story to tell you that in the early 60s, when I was at a secondary modern school in Chiswick, England played a Wednesday afternoon international against, I think it was Hungary. And at lunchtime, half the school emptied to go and watch the football, and only half the school stayed to study.
Was this the one when Trevor Brookings scored?
I don't remember. We're talking 60 years ago.
Oh, right. Okay. So, probably
anyway,
not then.
Anyway, the result of it was the following day, the half of the school that had skived off to watch the football were lined up in about a 200-metre line outside the headmaster's office.
And shot.
And, well, nearly. The headmaster was a master of wielding this twig of a stick.
Oh, goodness.
He would give you 6 of the best. And I can guarantee you, you would not be sitting down for your next football game.
And he did that to 200 kids?
Yeah. All queued up waiting for 6 of the best. So it has nothing to your conversation tonight. I just think it's just a recollection from when I was a kid.
Well, it just shows how times change, doesn't it? Because I mean, if you did that today, you'd be arrested for child abuse.
Well, absolutely, and many of the teachers would have done for what they did. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, you definitely would have not stood up. You would not sat down for your next football game. You'd have been still standing up. But it's so much pain. So anyway, it's just something I wanted to tell you. That's all.
What's it like watching England matches in Tenerife? Do you go down to a bar to watch them?
Yeah, we get them on English time.
Right.
We're on the same timeline. So I'm sort of toying with the idea. I'm quite an old guy now. I'm 76. Whether I've got, I'm intending to stay up and watch the 1 o'clock Sunday night, Monday morning game I mean, I want to, and I think I probably will, because I've been a football lover all my life, played till I was 40, so I'm intending to do it. But it's business about whether kids should go to bed or stay up and watch it. I mean, I have got no opinion on that. It's up to them and their parents.
Shall I tell you that my colleague Chris has come up with the match that you're talking about. It took place on Wednesday, the 5th of May, 1965. England beat Hungary 1-0 at Wembley. And do you know who scored the goal?
Probably Priscus, probably.
No, England won. Jimmy Greaves.
Greaves, he's one of the best goal scorers that's ever lived on this planet.
Absolutely right. He's one person I would love to have met. I used to love watching Saint and Greavesy at lunchtime, and of course he played for, at the end of his career, he played for West Ham and actually scored a few goals for us. But anyway,
he was a genius striker.
He absolutely was.
Genius.
Thank you very much indeed, Colin. Enjoy the match. Lauren says, our son is 12. We're all big football fans. Up until now, we were totally decided that staying up was a ridiculous idea and definitely wasn't happening, as we all have work or school the next day. He also has a football tournament on Sunday, so no chance of an afternoon nap or super early night. But after listening to your conversation, we're now about 90% sure we're going to ignore every sensible thought in our heads and let him stay up. You only live once, right? Iain, you are a bad influence. Well, I hope you're going to tell your son who he's got to thank for being allowed to stay up to watch this match. Because I genuinely think, and okay, you can say I'm not a parent, so how would I even know? But I genuinely think you're actually doing your son a real favour by doing this, because at the age of 12, yes, you are still a child, but you're on your way to adulthood. You've got to learn the art of taking responsibility for your own actions. And if he's tired in school the next day, well, fair enough. I think teachers are going to have a bit of understanding for that, because probably they'll be tired as well. I hope by 10 o'clock in 6 minutes' time, you've got 100% of the way there, Lauren. Let's go to Kevin, who is in, and I'm going to murder this town, Cartagena. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, good evening. It is Cartagena, yeah.
Oh, thank God for that. What would you like to tell me?
Well, I've listened to all of this. It's like, I listened to a call about four calls back. Well, he was talking about a 7-year-old signing a bit of paper. My goodness. Let's just be parents. My children are 25 and 23 now, and it's like, when I was that age, when they were that age, you're a parent. You should know your kids. If you're going to get them to watch the football late at night, brilliant, blah 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 blah. But in my view, just my view, the reality of it is they'll be fast asleep by 11. They're not going to get there. So it's a bit of a strange question, really. That's my thought, and I love LBC. But it's a bit of a strange question, and that's a bit of a problem that we have today. Because let's not overthink this. Let's just be parents and understand our kids.
Well, I don't think we should overthink it at all. I mean, obviously, the reason we're talking about it is because of what Thomas Tuchel said, and I just thought, look, my last programme of the week, last hour, let's do something a little bit lighter and just have a debate. Because I think genuinely some parents will be having real debates with themselves about whether they should do this or not. And I just wanted to say my view is say England beat Mexico 5-0, I mean, I know it's unlikely,
fantastic.
But let's say they do. Harry Kane scores all 5 goals. Any England fan would want to have witnessed that, wouldn't they? Whether they're 7 years old or 77 years old.
Yeah, I get that, but with all due respect, a 7-year-old is going to be fast asleep, and probably an 11-year-old as well.
Well, some may be.
My experience, some may be, but I just think it's my view, Iain, is that question is it's a valuable question, but it opens the door to too much in-depth thought about being a parent. Just be a parent.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Mark says, one of my earliest memories was sitting on my dad's shoulders at a campsite in the south of France watching the 66 World Cup final. I was 5 years old. There was no thuggish behaviour, and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. Let your kids watch it, but watch it with them as a family. Celebrate the spectacle with your children. Avoid abandoning them to spend time in a tribal environment. Right, quick last call from Neil in Croydon. Neil, very good evening. What would you like to say?
Evening. I think that kids should be made to go to school because I think we're encouraging kids to get into a fantasy land. There is not a chance in at all that England are going to qualify or go through. Of
course there is.
Not a chance. They barely made it through the other day against a really useless team.
Well, they were. Well, Congo were not a useless team.
Or no evidence to prove that England are going to win anything probably in the next 40 years. They do not compare to France.
Oh, come on, Neil. I wanted a nice uplifting call to end the programme.
I'm sorry about that, but unfortunately, reality has to hit sometimes because we have this every 4 years, every 2 years for the Euros, and it's exactly the same. And then soon we'll be working out what the scapegoat can be or who the scapegoat can be or what the excuse can be. I think somebody, it may have been you or somebody else, said, it's going to be because they're at altitude. No. France don't think like that. Brazil don't think like that. Spain don't think like that. They're good enough to possibly win it. That's the reality of England, unfortunately.
Well, I think we are possibly good enough to win it if we play well on the day. And you saw how we played in the second half against Croatia. That's the best England performance I've seen since we beat Germany 5-1 in 2001. And there's no reason why that team can't replicate that form on a good day. Whether it'll happen, I'm a bit like you. I somehow doubt it, but you live in hope. And I measure my life expectancy by the number of World Cups I've still got to see. And I reckon I've got 4 left. So I'd like to think that we've got a good chance of winning this. And if we don't, well, we just go on to the next one, don't we? Thank you very much, Neil. Thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening and throughout this week. I'll be back on Monday evening from 7, regardless of the result in Mexico. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Clive Ball, but right now it's Ben Kentish.
Iain, thank you very much. I'm glad somebody's confident we might win the World Cup. Hello there, welcome to Late Nights with Ben Kentish on LBC.